Welcome to Manhwa Recaps, spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. The manhwa starts with introducing us to a hunter institution named Valhalla. Multiple people try to apply, but the admission rate is 500 to 1, so only 150 people can graduate from the academy. It shows competition, and we see multiple fights happening, each within their designated cubes. We see an instructor named Lee Sankyil overseeing the fights, and a man approaches him saying there are a lot this time around. His name is Yu Min-jun. The instructor asks if the man is here to see his niece, and the man says of course, and that the Yushin family is expecting a lot from Soyeon. We learn that she's a genius born within one of the top 5 great families, and she is able to wield mana much more advanced than her age should allow, even imbuing her sword with it. And at the age of 16, she competed against the Yushin family, and came out on top. Sankyil asks if that's all, or if there's anything else he doesn't know. And Min-kun tells him she is apparently able to communicate with their family's guardian constellation. And we learn that the reason the 5 families exist is because each one has a guardian constellation associated with them. Normally a hunter receives blessings or has a contract with a constellation, however, the 5 families are different. Each family has their own respective constellation, each with its own specialty, and their blessings are much greater than normal constellations. Sankyil recognizes if she can really communicate with it, then she's definitely a genius. Min-jun asks how she's doing, and Sankyil says, she'll start in 30 seconds. And Min-jun asks if he can watch. Sankyil pulls up a window, and we see Soyeon standing in front of a man, Kim Ju-hyuk. Sankyil comments that they are both quite calm, and Min-jun says the opponent knows it's Soyeon, so he's probably just given up, and they comment that Ju-hyuk has no fighting spirit, and they think it'll end quickly. The countdown begins, and we see the fight start. Soyeon rushes in and swipes at Ju-hyuk, creating a wave of mana to be launched at him. As it goes to hit him, we see everyone making a surprised faces, and it shows her passed out on the floor. Equal rights, equal lefts. He's declared the victor, and he wonders why everyone is so weak, and asks if this is really 300 years in the future. It cuts to a flashback of 300 years ago, inside the Tower of Destruction. We see a man named Barky, the god of destruction, commending the martial god Kim Yun-oh, and Yun-oh kicks Barky's head off, and begins to laugh. A pop-up appears saying he's defeated the boss of the tower, and the tower begins to shake. He realizes the tower is being destroyed due to Barky being dead. He explains he's been busy since he was a kid as a hunter, and just when he finally gained recognition, this happens to him, and he wonders if he should have brought his disciples, but realizes it would have been bad because Barky was too strong for them. And he is crushed by a piece of debris. But he opens his eyes and learns he reincarnated 300 years into the future, and while his body is weak, he just needs to adjust, and live peacefully. But a window appeared commenting that the tower will return in 5 years, and he resolves himself to destroy the tower once and for all this time, and then live his life of luxury after. Another pop-up appears, telling him to regain his memories and weapons inside of Valhalla, and then it cuts to the top 10 of the competition. We learn his opponent is part of the Osun family, and his name is Seuk. He comments, thinking that Ju-hyuk is weak looking, and tells him he will QD him quickly, and when asked what QD means, he says it means quickly destroy. Ju-hyuk tells him to FO then, and curses at the man, and the match starts. We learn that Seuk's physique is his main talent, and that he's exceptionally strong, and thus called a genius for being born with such a strong constitution. Angered by Ju-hyuk, he rushes in and begins to throw a punch, but it is dodged, and Ju-hyuk kicks his leg out from under him, causing him to lose his balance, and hits him with a palm strike to the chest, knocking him unconscious. And he is declared the victor, and he walks away. The observers are surprised, and comment they didn't expect Seuk to lose that quickly to a simple attack. The head of the Osun family says it wasn't a simple attack, and even if his son never cared to learn martial arts, he still dodged any attack from his peers, but it was something he couldn't dodge. And that his son even used magic but was easily avoided, and he realizes from the second that his son charged in, Ju-hyuk already had a plan, and calls his talent monstrous, and that the others are just ignorant of his talent, and he'll bring him into his family. It goes to the next fight, and we see the crowd going wild over the girl he's fighting, and he wonders why adults are acting like this. She is introduced as Choi Arin, and the match starts. She postures herself, and holds her katana, and they just awkwardly stare at each other, and he wonders if she is waiting for him to attack, and he compliments her on trying to read the situation. And he decides to see how she reacts with him approaching her. She begins to put lightning on her sword, and everyone is surprised. She begins to draw her sword, as he continues to walk at her. She thinks it's her chance and swipes at him. She is surprised he's vanished, and he calls out to her, and tells her if she shows him where she's going to attack with her eyes, it makes dodging too easy. She is surprised he's beside her, and he punches at her, but she blocks it with her blade, and it pushes her back. He comments on her blocking it, and she is shaken by how powerful the attack was. He puts his fist on the blade, and tells her to try dodging this, and Bruce leaves her, knocking her unconscious. He comments that his attack felt off, but that it doesn't matter, and he's declared the victor. We see him walking away from the school, and he is swarmed by interviewers, and he yells for them all to shut up. It shows some articles about Ju Hyuk cursing at reporters, and some comments about him, and then it cuts back to Valhalla. They are having a student orientation, and Ju Hyuk is bored, but notices everyone is afraid of him, and he wonders if he showed off too much, and remembers the window about finding his memories. The entrance ceremony ends, he heads to the virtual combat simulation room, and the instructor is confused why he has all of the top students, even though it was meant to be random assignments. And he sees Ja Euk and thinks he's doomed. He introduces himself to the class, and we see him start the simulation. The students freak out because the terrain changed, and the instructor shows bloodlust, which makes some monsters appear. Seuk gets attacked, but a barrier blocks the attack, and we see it holding off the monsters, and the instructor calls for Ja Euk, and he asks if he can take care of the monsters alone, and the instructor thinks that he's scared and he'll say no, but Ja Euk begins to laugh. The instructor asks if he really thinks he can beat them by himself. Ja Euk says yes, and the instructor tells him to do it then, and Ja Euk asks if he does it, he'll have a prize, and under the condition he beats all the monsters, he asks what the instructor will bet. And the instructor says he'll do whatever he can under his power for him. The instructor tries to explain, but Ja Euk just tells him to hand the sword over, and asks how he's expected to fight without a weapon. The instructor pulls out a sword, and hands it to Ja Euk, and we see the barrier open and everyone stares as Ja Euk begins to slaughter the mobs. It shows him continuing to kill the monsters with ease, killing 4 with one slice, and easily defending himself too. Ja Euk is happy that it's been 300 years since he's held a knife, and that it's not bad, and how in the past, they'd use any weapon available. While he's thinking, a large monster appears to swing a club at him, but it is easily dodged and he stabs it in the face. He comments that it's a well-made copy, and the instructor is surprised because he just let him use a generic sword that doesn't have any magic power, but it's slicing the mobs like butter. Almost as if it is sucking in the monsters. The other students watch in shock, besides Aaron, who is in awe. We see Ja Euk sheath his sword over the monsters' corpses, and he asks if the instructor will keep his promise. It cuts to later in the day, and the instructor ends the class, and we see that Ja Euk is exhausted, because he's never been to school before. He's interested in the constellations, and mentions how it's used to refer to those who are gods, and they have a connection to hunters, and he thinks the rest of the school will be useless. And he decides it's time to start seriously training, because he's weak. We see Aaron approach Ja Euk, and it cuts to Sankil and the combat instructor talking about how Ja Euk killed all of the mobs, and they are surprised that he has no background, and that he's an orphan from a dangerous area. We learn that Ja Euk asked to get into the constellation room here, and Sankil says he'll talk to the headmaster about it. The instructor thanks him, and then tells him he's worried about what's going to happen in the next year. Because his class isn't easy to control due to having the top 5 families, and Ja Euk. Sankil tells him he isn't trying to console him, but there's an exchange student from the Ventric family in another class. His name is Rockdil Ventric, and how he was kicked out of another academy for causing trouble, and now he realizes his class is better. It cuts back to Ja Euk and Aaron, and he asks her what she wants, and she asks him to teach her swordsmanship. She specifies for him to teach her the swordsmanship he showed back at the simulation, and he tells her no. She asks why, and he says he just doesn't want to, and if she doesn't have anything else to say, then he's leaving. She asks again, and he repeats his answer. He asks if there's something wrong with her ears, and tells her to stop clinging onto him, and he has no intention of teaching her, so piss off, and he walks away from her. It cuts to the next day in class, and Ju Hyuk comments that his body is better than he thought, and that, at this moment, he can't do anything because he doesn't have magic power, and it's hard to control mana. But if he finds an item, he can fix the issue. We see Rockdil calling out to him, and Ju-hyuk asks who he is, and Rockdil introduces himself, and asks him if he wants to be strong. We learn that the Ventric family uses Beak Mask, which is their guardian, who will sign contracts with anyone in the Ventric family, even if they aren't of Main descent, and this allows them to quickly gain a large sum of power in Europe. And this has caused Rockdil to become arrogant, and this is why he was kicked out of his other academy. Rockdil thinks to himself he always gets what he wants while looking at his soulless attendant Yuria, and that he'll get Ju-hyuk, who is the center of attention right now, and begins to explain to him what he means, but Ju-hyuk asks if he's an idiot. This angers Rockdil, and he asks what he said, and Ju-hyuk explains he understands what Rockdil is trying to do, and that he's indeed an idiot, and asks if he's wrong. Sankyil tells Rockdil to get back to his seat, and when Rockdil yells, asking who called his name, he sees Sankyil, and walks off angrily, and tells Ju-hyuk to meet him later. It cuts to Ju-hyuk walking out of school, and we see Arn approach him again, repeating her question, which confuses him. We then see Rockdil smashing a lamp out of anger, mad that an orphan humiliated him. He calls out to Yuri, and she doesn't answer, so he grabs her by the hair, and tells her to answer him, and asks if she really thinks she's the eldest of the palace family, and asks if he should throw her out, and she says no. He throws her to the floor, and tells her to contract someone named Dizra, because there's someone he needs to eliminate, and that there's someone in the Rise family he wants to see. She says understood. It goes back to Ju-hyun in his dorm, training his mana, on his bed. He breathes out and says that his body is seriously garbage, and that he can't draw out any magic, and he begins to recall Arn following him, and he asks her why she's following him. And she just repeats what she said previously, and he asks if she's a parrot. He thinks she's annoying, and says he should get her to leave, and tells her 10 million per lesson. She looks down, and he tells her that he's going to leave because she can't afford it, and she asks for his phone. He hands it to her, and she tells him she's putting in her number. That way, it's easier for her to send him money. Ju-hyuk asks what, and realizes she sent him 100 million won, and she asks if he can teach her now. And he says he won't, and he turns down her money. It goes back to him at his dorm, and he says he was surprised about earlier, and how she could have that much money. But he's tempted by the money, but says it's just money, so it doesn't matter, and we see him preparing for something and says it's time to find the secret vault. We see him walking in the woods, and he mentions how he checked out the school in advance, and that most of his hidden notes were destroyed, and there are at least 4 notes, but he's certain that they are in the mountains of Valhalla. He takes his hood off, and he releases some energy, and looks for marbles that respond to his magic, and that he can sense it even with a little bit of magic. He finds it, and begins to dig it up, and comments how weak he is again, and if he knew he'd struggle this much he'd have buried it shallower. And if it weren't for the Tower of Destruction, there wouldn't be a need for this, and the world was on the verge of destruction, and there wasn't any room for his items, so he made notes for it, and hopes the inside is safe. After a while of digging, he finally found it, and we see a vault. He looks for the keyhole and says a regular key wouldn't fit. So he's going to make a string of magic, and form it into a key, and he opens it, and drops down into it. And we see him atop a pile of treasures. Now that he doesn't need to worry about money, he can go search for something, but doesn't specify which. He notices there are storage stones in the vault. He reaches out and picks up one, then infuses some mana into it, and we see it overflowing with mana. He decides to take the jewelry and leave the gold bars, and we see him back in class having an existential crisis. But he is startled when Arn comes up to his desk, and she asks the same question again, and he wonders why someone from a swordsmanship family keeps asking him for training. He decides to ask her, and she says she's never seen anyone wield a blade better than him, and he asks about her father, but she is interrupted by the simulation instructor telling Ju-hyuk to follow him. We see him walking to the door, and Arn reaches out, but stops, and Ju-hyuk tells her 6 a.m. tomorrow to come to the training grounds, and she is surprised, and he asks if she doesn't want to. She shakes her head, saying she'll be there. We see Ju-hyuk in the teacher's office, and the teacher tells him he's been approved to go into the Constellation room, and he just needs to go to the basement, and that he's now allowed to enter any floor lower than the first one. Ju-hyuk says okay, and asks when he can go, and the instructor says tonight is fine, and he replies that he'll go today. The teacher says they can go now. It cuts to them outside of the Constellation room. Ju-hyuk comments that security is so tight, and not just the security, but even the walls are covered in magic, and it's surrounded except for the entrance. Ju-hyuk asks the teacher how someone would go about getting to the second floor, and if you'd need to do something criminal, and the teacher says no, but you would be expelled, and that you'd lose your mind before you lose the skill, and he explains that the Constellations magic runs rampant down there, and if you touch it your mind will break. Ju-hyuk says he understands, and the teacher is confused why he's asking all of this, and if he really wants to go down there, but decides that the first place candidate wouldn't do that, and he knows it's better to stay in the academy. The teacher tells him he has 30 minutes, and then he must come out. Ju-hyuk tells him he'll be back soon while waving. We see the status window again about reclaiming his memories, and Ju-hyuk says he doesn't care if he gets expelled, and that he only came here because of this. As he walks down the stairs, he wonders why there are so many of them, and he comes to a weird prison-like floor, and he wonders if this is really the first floor, but says it isn't important, and that he should go deeper. A window appears, saying he's met the requirements, and that he's being moved to the room, and we see him teleport, and he hears a voice saying it's been a while and we see Barky, and he says it's been 300 years, but before he can finish his sentence gets punched, and Ju-hyuk looks angry, saying he's happy to see him. Barky tells him to wait, but gets hit again, and tells him to calm down, but is hit again, and again, and again. Ju-hyuk stands over Barky, and tells him he isn't the type to start violence, but it's different because he destroyed his future, while stomping him. Barky tells him to wait, and asks if he isn't curious about this place, and Ju-hyuk says he is, because it's an empty room. Barky tells him it's an imaginary room, and to be specific, it's an artifact, and that the version he sees currently is just an imaginary version, because his real body died 300 years ago. Ju-hyuk asks if he's always been in this artifact, and when Barky says that's right, and he's become a constellation while excited. But Ju-hyuk isn't having any of it, and punches him again. It cuts to the teacher outside of the constellation room, and he sees Ju-hyuk coming out of the door, and makes sure he didn't do anything weird down there, and Ju-hyuk says of course, he just looked around, and he couldn't have gone further because he would have lost his mind. The teacher says okay, and to go home, and Ju-hyuk begins to walk away, and he recalls the rest of his conversation with Barky, and asks if he's the one who is controlling the window he keeps seeing. And Barky says he doesn't know what it is, and Ju-hyuk gets angry, and Barky tells him it's the truth. After he died, he's been stuck inside of this room for the last 300 years with no power. Ju-hyuk asks who sent the message then, and Barky says he received it too, and to contact Ju-hyuk to receive his memories back. But because of this, a weird person emerged, and he wonders if it is the same person who made him the owner of the Tower of Destruction. Ju-hyuk asks who the man is, and Barky says he doesn't know, because his memories of that part are all gone, and he doesn't think they'll come back. And he asks what Ju-hyuk's notification says, and Ju-hyuk tells him what it says, but he doesn't remember losing any memories, and he remembered the tower. Barky says maybe the memories haven't come to his mind yet, and that he's already found the weapon, so the memories will naturally return. Barky explains that this space is the inner world of sacred artifacts, and that he became a constellation because of this artifact. Ju-hyuk gets angry and yells at him. It cuts back to him walking, and we learn the sword was his, and that he wanted to destroy and leave it behind, but the sword won't leave Barky unattended, and that he received a new quest from the sword. Someone calls out to him, and we see a bunch of goons saying they are his seniors, and asks him to introduce himself. Ju-hyuk is surprised a bully has juniors, and the lead, Goober Ririk, says it's not enough to just introduce himself, and one of them walks up, saying he'll beat him first, and begins to say some random stuff, and gets instantly taken out, and Ju-hyuk tells him to stop talking, and fight instead. He continues to combo the piss out of the guy, and then sends him flying over the rest of his group, and hits the wall, rendering him unconscious. When the group turns back around, they see Ju-hyuk has a sword, and are surprised because he didn't have one a second ago. Ju-hyuk tells them to quickly come at him already, and then it cuts to 3 hours earlier. We see Rockdil telling Ririk that he needs someone taken care of, and that he'll reward him. He tells him Ju-hyuk's name, and it doesn't matter how they do it, but to take care of him, and asks if he'll accept. Ririk accepts, and we see him thinking that it doesn't matter if Ju-hyuk is first place. He's still just a freshman, so he won't stand a chance, and that the second graders have contracts with Constellations, and that is how a student becomes a second grader, is because of contracts. And Ju-hyuk, who isn't in a special family, should be easily beaten up, is what Ririk thought, but we see Ju-hyuk taking out his men in rapid succession. He easily claps 2 of them, and then dodges another attack, and hits him in the face, sending him flying. Ririk is stunned by a non-contractor beating up contractors, and wonders what his strange swordsmanship is. It just looks like he's using moderate force, but everyone is getting seriously hit. Ju-hyuk taunts the rest of them, and Ririk yells, "Don't be scared because it's just one first grader," and Ju-hyuk says it seems like the boss has some spirit. Ririk runs at him with his sword, but is hit in the stomach by the sheath, and Ju-hyuk pushes into the hilt, causing a powerful attack on Ririk. And we see him lose consciousness, and Ju-hyuk slaps him, telling him to wake up. He asks him why he picked a fight with him, and who they are. Ririk says they are his seniors, and Ju-hyuk asks if it's common for seniors to bully first graders, and Ririk says it's just to put the first place into his place. Ju-hyuk comments on his loyalty, and tells him he'll leave, but to clean the place up. Ririk asks if he thinks he can go to school normally after this, and if people know, then he'll be expelled. Ju-hyuk says, whatever. If they try to say that, everyone will just think some second graders came to bully him, but all got cleaned up, and then he'd be too embarrassed to even show his face. So to think wisely if he wants to go to school, and join a guild, then walks away. It shows Rockdale anticipating a phone call, and it's Ririk. Rockdale answers and asks how it went, and Ririk tells him he's not doing the job anymore. Rockdale asks what he just said, and Ririk tells him he is staying away from Ju-hyuk. Rockdale is confused, because earlier, Ririk was confident about it. Ririk goes to hang up, and Rockdale yells, asking him to wait, and says if he's saying this because he was beaten up, then he should report it to the administration, and if injuries are still visible, then there's evidence, so can't he do that much? Rockdale tells him if he does that, then he'll give him the full amount, and he'll even try to get his family to fund him. Ririk tells him even if his family supports him, they can't reclaim the honor that they lost, and hangs up on him. Rockdale angrily breaks his phone, and asks Yuri if he's contacted Dizra, and she tells him that he's been informed, but he's far away, so it'll take a while to get here. He asks her where he is, and it cuts to Mexico, at an academy named Aripia. We see a group of defeated students, and we are introduced to Dizra Ventrick, and he is reading a message from Rockdale asking for him to come meet Ju-hyuk, and the reward is already prepared, and Dizra is excited that he is going to receive money. It cuts to the next day, and it's the Valhalla training room. Ju-hyuk comments that the room is really big, and it puts him in the mood to run. He hears Barky's voice, asking why he's here, and Ju-hyuk asks where he is, and Barky tells him he's in the sword, and asks why he's surprised. Ju-hyuk says he was surprised because he thought he made it out of the sword, and that he'd have to beat him up again. Barky gets shivers, and tells him it's not like that, and Ju-hyuk tells him if that's the case, then everything is okay. And begins to stretch, while asking Barky if he's sure it's okay, and Barky asks if he means his state. Ju-hyuk tells him no, and he's talking about this word and how it's become an artifact, and how they took it out of the room. Barky tells him it's no worry since he replaced it with a replica. Ju-hyuk says that's what he's worried about, and asks how he even made a replica. Barky explains that when he gained consciousness, he lost all of his strength, but he could make replicas from the start, and he doesn't know why he has this ability. Ju-hyuk begins to stretch backward, and he spots Arn just staring at him. He looks a little surprised she showed up. She asks if he's going to teach her now, and he tells her no, that they'll focus on her stamina. She asks why, and he tells her if she doesn't want to do it, she can leave. He gets her to start with stretching, and he explains that if you improve your stamina, the better you can control and absorb mana. And while the current method of training is weird, everyone seems to be investing into their mana before their stamina, even Arn. While she has a lot of mana, her stamina is low. She finishes stretching, and he tells her it's time for real training, and we see them do a series of physical exercises, and afterward, Arn is exhausted, and Ju-hyuk tells her they are just getting started, and to stop lying down and to get up, and that they still have running to do. She looks devastated. It cuts to Ju-hyuk in class saying they trained harder than last time, and she has a physique worth developing. She is shivering from DOMS, and a teacher tells them all they are having a test today. We're introduced to her, and her name is Lilia. She says while she briefly explained on the first day, she's informed them to self-study on dimensional monsters. So today, she'll be testing them and how well they know each monster. It shows everyone taking their test normally, except Arn and Ju-hyuk. And the teacher says time is up, so pass the tests forward, and while the test won't add to your grade, it'll be used to measure your ability in the next class. She tells them the next class will be a combat simulation, and she'll see them later. Barky asks Joo-hyuk if he's sure he can just write his answers like that, and Joo-hyuk wonders if Barky just watching. Barky says he was, and Joo-hyuk asks if he's reading his thoughts, to which Barky says he can only hear the ones that involve himself. Joo-hyuk says he only wrote the answers the way he knew them, and Barky says he understands. It cuts to the teacher's lounge, and she is angry at Joo-hyuk's answers. The regular teacher sees her grading his class's exams, and she says they did well, and the teacher looks a little relieved and says he'll be on his way. Then she says Joo-hyuk's name, and he asks if he didn't put effort in, and she says it's not that, he's just mocking the class, and that it cannot be overlooked, and she'll show him his paper and educate him, because the monsters can't be taken care of that easily. Next week at the combat simulation room, we see the teacher saying most people did well, but calls Joo-hyuk to come forward. He walks up to the podium, and she hands him his paper, and we see he has a 0. She asks if he's sure he took the test properly, and he told her he did. She asks what's the best way to take care of rock goblins, and asks what his answer is, and he reads out, stab it in the stomach. She does the same thing with the second question, and he gives her another straightforward answer, and she says he can't be serious, and tells him that a rock goblin is B+ for defense, so even normal sword aura doesn't damage it, but he's saying a sword would work? He tells her yes, it's all over in one strike, and she gets angry. She says she understands, and if he's that confident, she'll give him an opportunity. We see her transfer the room, and she tells him if he kills the monsters just like he wrote the answers, she'll regrade his points. He says okay, and puts his test down, and grabs a sword. He walks at the monster, and she comments that she's heard of him killing the goblins previously, so she knows he's talented, but a rock goblin cannot be taken care of with any normal sword. The goblin attacks Joo-hyuk, and he rears his sword back, and the teacher is shocked. We see the sword is in the goblin's stomach, and it cracks, then disappears. And he looks at the teacher and says there, just stab him in the stomach. We see the other students are shocked he killed it with a normal sword, and the teacher asks how he did it. He says she saw him do it, just stab it in the stomach? She begins to break down, thinking that only an A-ranked contractor could kill it with a normal sword, but Joo-hyuk took it out with a sword, and he asks if his answer was correct. She tells him that was only one question, and she summons the next monster. She explains that jungle goblins are hard to take care of, because if you don't do it properly, the first goblin will use a howling skill, and other goblins will appear, so normally a magician would be there to kill them all at once, and while he only sees 3 goblins, there are 5 more behind them. And it'll be hard for him to do this with just a sword. We see him rush in, stabbing one in the head, and then another in the head, and before the other can scream, stabs it in the mouth. We see their bodies disappear, and he asks the teacher if the second question was right too. It cuts to Arin and Joo-hyuk running on treadmills, and she is gassed out after their session. He asks if her clan trained her and why she's struggling with just running. She says she doesn't normally push herself like this. He asks how she plans to go up against monsters, if she doesn't train properly. She says she just used magic by borrowing her Constellations' power. And Joo-hyuk confirms his suspicion that they are focusing on magic rather than physical capabilities. However, the risk is big if they keep doing that. He gives some examples of why it is risky, and sometimes how constellations might not even lend power. He asks her if she thinks these exercises are worth it, and she says, of course, and that he'd teach her swordsmanship if she did it. And he says it sounds like she's only doing it because he told her to. Her brain stops working, and he tells her never mind, and they should end it today because they need to go to the academy. He tells her he's going to do another set, and asks if she wants to join, but brain delay kicks back in, so he just tells her to go ahead and go, and she says see you later and leaves. Barky asks if her name is Arin Choi, and Joo-hyuk wonders why he's asking. Barky explains that she kept up with his training without complaining, but asks why he decided to help her. Joo-hyuk says it's because she pestered him so much. Barky asks if he's ever shown her his swordsmanship, and Joo-hyuk says no, but she might have noticed during class. Barky calls her amusing. Joo-hyuk says that's why he found her interesting, so he thought he would teach her a little. Joo-hyuk hears a grunt and looks over to see Seok benching, and they both just stare at each other, awkwardly. Joo-hyuk asks how long he's been there, and Seok says he's been there since the start, and he's always exercised before attending the academy. As he's leaving, Joo-hyuk comments that because of the constitution he was born with, it looks like he's able to train for a long time. Barky asks him why he's interested in Seok, And Juhyok comments that it's because he's smarter than those who only train magic, and Barky comments maybe. Juhyok asks what the constellations even do, and Barky says he's not sure. Juhyok asks if that's all he can say. Barky says while he is a constellation, he's done nothing for the last 300 years, so he doesn't know anything, but that he might be able to learn if he finishes his quests. Juhyok looks at his new quest, and wonders about the Eye of the Great Forest, and mentions how if it weren't for the quest, he was just going to leave after getting his things back, but he has to be stealthy now. Barky comments how he already failed, because he beat up the delinquents. Juhyok says, until he clears the quest, he can't leave anytime soon, and he can learn about his reincarnation. It cuts to the United Kingdom, and we see the Ventric Manor. And we see a woman named Adalia, who is the vice house owner, asking a butler to tell her what happened. He tells her the labyrinth in the outskirts has been taken care of, and that he's thinking of recruiting a few of the men from it. She comments that one of them is strong, and the butler tells her that 2 of them are A rank. She tells him they are at a level deserving of the blessing, and to test out their capabilities and send them to her. He says understood, and she asks if that's all? He tells her he has some information about Rockdale, and he tells her that he called Disra to South Korea, and this angers Adalia. We learn that Disra is his family's problem child, and that he's committed a lot of bad acts using the family name, and at 19 he killed 5 people just because they started an argument with him, and at 20, he was cut off from the family, and he's been hiding for many years. She tells the butler to keep surveillance on him, and inform Rockdale if he's caught doing something weird, he will be exiled from the family. The butler takes his leave, and we see Adalia say that they are all wielding power they didn't earn themselves, and it isn't meant for trash. And in the end, the power is all for her, and she looks at a picture of their guardian constellation. It cuts to a lecture at school as the teacher is explaining things. Juhyok zones out and begins to think about how his body has a talent for using mana. Though it's not on the level of a genius, it's better than his previous body. But it's weird, that no matter how untrained the body was, the condition is terrible. He was barely able to circulate his chi on the first day, and just a little bit of shoveling made him want to pass out. And he wonders if something happened in the past. But realizes there's no point in stressing over it now. He sees Soyeon tapping at his desk, and she hands him a note. He opens it up just to see Hey, and he wonders what she wants. It shows the teacher explaining everyone is allowed to leave school, but to submit an application beforehand, and that's all for class today. We see Juhyok holding an application for leave, and Barky asks if he's planning to go outside. Juhyok says he is, and Barky asks where he's going, and before he can answer, he's interrupted by Soyeon calling out to him. He asks what she wants, and tells her he even replied to the note, but she didn't say anything. He tells her to hurry up because he needs to submit something, and she begins to stutter very badly, saying, so, and I, repeatedly. He tells her to hurry up and say it, and calls her a freak. She gets angry, asking why she's a freak, and he asks her if she's making him angry for fun, or if it's normal, and asks what she wants to say. It cuts back to him killing the rock goblin, and she's confused because it's different than the books, and she just wants to know how he killed the goblin, but her pride hurts too much. As she begins to ask him, Lilia asks him how he killed the rock goblin, and they are both confused. He's confused where she came from, and asks her why she's butting in, and he thought she hated him because he embarrassed her. She says she's not bothered by it, and she believed there was only one way to kill monsters, but he showed her that isn't true, and she asks if he wants to be her assistant. He tells her no, and he's turning in his form to leave. She begins to beg him, and they continue walking away from Soyeon, who is shocked she was left out of the conversation. The next day we see Juhyok at the market. It gives us a flashback of him on his phone, getting information about where he can sell the treasure in the vault, and he finds the market, and from what he's researched, after paying an entrance fee, you can trade anything, but it's seen as a black market that villains use, and the reason the market is even possible is due to a constellation called the Hidden Ruler, and since a constellation created and maintains it, high-ranking people use it openly. Even though it's illegal, the government doesn't crack down on it, and that's the only reason he was able to find it. He sees a post on how to enter it, and what to watch out for, but is interrupted by a text from Aaron. She sends a bunch of crying rabbits, and says she doesn't think she can make training tomorrow, since she has to go out. He replies with KK, and she question marks him. He hits her with it back and says he's just telling her to have a nice trip. Then she spams him with nodding rabbit emojis. He goes back to the post, because if you open the link in the comments, you can make a reservation. It then cuts to him back at the market, and he approaches a rundown cafe. He walks in and opens a door to see the market. He wonders why it feels familiar even though it's his first time there, and especially the sky and the moon are similar to 300 years ago. Someone asks him if it's his first time, and he recalls the post mentioning a man wearing a leather suit, and he tells him it is and pulls out some money, and hands it to the man. The man asks if he has any questions, and Ju-hyuk says he needs to sell some jewels, and wonders where to go. The man asks if he wants an auction, and he tells him no, he just wants to sell it quickly. The man tells him to head to the 3rd district, because the merchants there buy anything. Ju-hyuk asks who the most trustworthy merchant is, and he recommends someone named Morris, and points him toward the 3rd district, and gives directions. And hands him a mask, saying he recommends he wears one. Due to the nature of the goods sold here, everyone should wear a mask, and to think of it as a freebie. Ju-hyuk thanks him, and heads to the 3rd district. He finds Morris, and tells him he has goods to sell. Morris says it depends on the item, but he will process them quickly. Ju-hyuk pulls out a bag and drops it onto the table. Morris opens it and begins to inspect the rings, and is shocked to find one of the rings is an artifact from the era of destruction. Morris wonders if the other rings are also artifacts, and he sees they all are. Ju-hyuk calls out to him, asking how much he can offer him, and Morris wonders where did he get this many artifacts, because, based on his voice, he's only in his 20s. He asks him where he got them, and Ju-hyuk says he heard those questions weren't asked here, and wonders if he was mistaken. Morris says he's right, and apologizes. He says he doesn't know how much to offer, because he can't process them as they are from the era of destruction, and he lacks the capital to buy them. Ju-hyuk asks where to get his money's worth then, and Morris points him to the auction hall. Ju-hyuk asks how long it would take to sell, and Morris says 2 to 3 weeks, and it'll be a while before the auction house opens. Ju-hyuk realizes the whole process would be a pain, and asks Morris how much they would go for at an auction. Morris puts it into his phone and shows Ju-hyuk, and he is shocked to see so many zeros, and he asks Morris how much he is missing to buy them. Morris says even if he sold everything he had, he would still only have 3/4 of the worth. Ju-hyuk tells him that is fine, and Morris is shocked. We learn artifacts are worth a lot because of the constellations, and that they react well to artifacts from the era of destruction, and even a normal person could make a contract with an S-ranked constellation because of them. He recalls a contractor called the Alchemist, and confirms again that the artifacts are from that era due to the way mana flows through them. He's surprised he got the artifacts, and says today is his lucky day. We see someone approach his stall, and we see a man wearing a black cat mask. It cuts to Ju-hyuk back at the cafe he came through, and checks his phone, and we see he earned a lot from the transaction, and with this, his money issue is solved, and he even has way more left in the vault, so he shouldn't have any issues in the future. He receives a call from an unknown number, and he answers it to hear Lilia asking him to get food together. He asks how she got his number, and she says it's because she's an instructor, and to come to the front of the fitness room for lunch, and he wonders who ends a call after saying what they need to, and wonders if he should leech free food. It cuts back to the market, and Morris is asking the man why he's here, and the man asks if their relationship is that bad. Morris says even if they see each other a few times, a merchant cannot just talk to the market's owner, and we're introduced to him. He goes by Black Cat. Cat tells him that he likes the way Morris treats him, and Morris asks why he's here. Cat tells him he'd like to look at the items he's listed for auction, and Morris says sure and pulls out the bag of rings. Cat tells him they should go for quite a bit, and Morris is confused about why he's saying that, and we see Cat's constellation really wants the ring. We see Lilia and Ju-hyuk at a table, and she's eating pasta, but notices that he isn't eating and asks him why. He just asks why Valhalla has a place like this, and she tells him that apart from the cafeteria and staff restaurant, they have a normal restaurant too, and is surprised he didn't know. He tells her he just wasn't interested, and asks why she called him here. She asks him again to be her assistant, he quickly says no. She tells him to think about it first, and explains he'd get many benefits. He asks what kind, and she tells him he'll get a scholarship, and many grants, and the chance to write a thesis with her, and if you publish a thesis, and his name will be listed in the Monster Research Association, and he can go out twice a week instead of once a month. He asks if there's anything else. And she tells him he gets to work with her. He says her ego sounds big, and she tells him to just be her assistant. He tells her doesn't want to. He thinks to himself that there's nothing tempting about the offer, and his current objective is getting to the eye of the Great Forest, and even if she's an instructor, getting there would be hard. He tells her he won't do it again, and she asks if he would like to trade intel, and she offers to give him the information he's curious about, and he'll tell her about monster attacks. He asks what kind of information. She tells him it's about Aaron, and as he goes to tell her he isn't interested, she interrupts him, saying Aaron might be disowned by her family. Joo-hyuk doesn't care and begins to leave, and Lilia asks where he's going, and he tells her the benefits aren't good for him, and he's done eating, so he's leaving. She says he should give her some intel, and he tells her he didn't really care about it. He says there is actually something he's curious about, and asks why she's so childish normally, but harsh while teaching. She says if she joked around while teaching about monsters, it would cause trouble, because monsters can be attributed to students' survival rates, and the students can't even memorize the basics, so she needs to be hard on them. He tells her that's cool, and tells her good luck while leaving. She calls out to him again, and says he should pay for the information before he leaves. He tells her he doesn't want to. It cuts to Shihung, and we're at the Kwijin family's estate. It shows Aaron's father, Jeonseok, and one of her brothers, Jinjin, and he tells them if they pass the test, they can form a contract with their sacred artifact, and it'll be a testament to them being the successor of the family. However, if you fail, you will be disowned by the family. And he asks if they'll choose to do it knowing this, and they both say yes. Their father tells them it will be held 3 weeks from now, and they may leave. We see Aaron and her brother walking, and he asks her if she can take a hint, and she asks, what? And he explains how their father had a strong expression when she said she would participate, and he tells her it seems like she really wants to be the head of the family, even though she is an illegitimate child. She makes a sour face, and he tells her don't delude yourself by thinking she can win. She can't even obtain a blessing, and she won't even be able to touch him. She doesn't say anything, and he tells her, since she's given up, to go leech off the family, and that he'll see her in 3 weeks. We see her standing there, and she recalls someone telling her she must become the head of the family, and if she does, then she can be free. It shows Joo-hyuk in class, and Barky comments that it's midterm season, and Joo-hyuk is surprised he's mentioning it, and Barky tells him if he would be quiet, he could hear what the teacher is saying about the midterms. The teacher says that exams are a huge deal, and the lowest scoring students get kicked out, and he hopes everyone is prepared for their exams. Joo-hyuk isn't worried about the practical exam, but the written one worries him. He tells Barky that since he's been with him the entire time, that he's taken the classes as well, so he can take the test for him instead. Barky says that he would find that unfair, and Joo-hyuk tells him it's not unfair. He's doing the test, Barky is just telling him the answers. Class ends, and we see Aaron approach Joo-hyuk, asking if they are training, and he asks if she doesn't want to do it. She tells him that isn't it, and he asks if she wants to learn swordsmanship, and he figured it was about time to talk about it. He tells her he'll teach her how to wield the blade, and uses this chance to practice with his weapon. He tells her to meet him in the training room, and she says okay. It cuts to them in the training room, and he asks her how long it's been since she's used her sword, and she tells him a day and a half, and she hasn't touched it since she started training with him. He asks if, before that, she would practice daily, and she says yes. He tells her to unsheath her sword, and we see her pull it out. He instructs her how to grip it, and she is shocked by the difference in slightly changing her grip. He tells her to come at him, and we see her sheath her sword again, and lightning begin to surge around her. She notices she's faster than before, but it is blocked. Joo-hyuk comments on it, and tells her not to put more magic into her feet than she needs to. She says okay, and we see her repeat it. He compliments her, but tells her to rotate more when she stops. Then tells her to continue attacking him, and not to rest. She says okay, and they clash swords again. We see Joo-hyuk dodge her blade, and it destroys some of the floor. She's glad to see that she's much stronger than before, and they continue clashing swords. It cuts to later in that day, and we see that Aaron has damaged the training area, and is tired. Joo-hyuk says it's been an hour already, so they should just call it here. She drops to the floor out of breath, and is happy that her skills have improved so much, but she still couldn't even touch Joo-hyuk. She asks when they will spar again, and Joo-hyuk thinks about it, and how it's beneficial to spar with her, and it's fun to teach her since she's talented, and she's familiar with draftsmanship. I have no idea what this is, and thanks to that it can help him find his senses, and if it were 300 years ago she would have been worth making into a disciple, but he doesn't have the freedom right now. She asks again if they'll spar another time, and he decides to joke around with her. and tells her doesn't want to, and she instantly says understood. He's surprised she gave up so fast, and she says it's because he's right, and thinks that if she follows his words, she'll become stronger. He thinks about what she said, and tells her that's all for today, and she tells him she'll see him next time. 2 weeks later, at the stadium, we see Soyeon, Seok, and Arin, and Juhyuk wonders why everyone is gathered here, and Barky tells him his teacher already told him 2 weeks ago. Sankil tells everyone he'll now explain the midterms, and that the evaluation is based on dungeon attack, and the students will team up and enter an artificial dungeon. They are free to make up any team, and the right amount of people is 8, but you can decide what number you want in your party, and you'll only be evaluated based on your contribution to the raid. And that the criteria for failing are not completing the raid in the given time. The dungeon's difficulty is F+, and he yells to start the exam. We see the students panicking and trying to form teams, and the teacher comments on them being flustered, and we see Soyeon saying her damage dealer isn't good enough, and she thinks to herself that she can't pick someone better than her, and 5 hours is plenty of time for the raid, and what's important is a contribution, and a party of 6 looks easy, but it's hard to stand out, and she tells her group it's time to go. Sankil says, as expected of the 5th generation, she grasped the point behind the exam well, but the rest of the students go in as groups of 20, or 8, and if the team isn't well balanced, there will be fights. Sankil tells the homeroom teacher that after 30 minutes, they'll begin grading the students, and we see Juhyuk watching them scoring the students who went in quickly, and he notices Arin hasn't gone in yet, so he asks her about it, and he asks her what she's going to do, and she says she'll do what Juhyuk says. This surprises him, and he wonders why she's been following his words so well since their last session. He tells her he'll be going in alone, so go. And she asks if she should enter alone too, and he tells her whatever. It doesn't look difficult. We see some of the students noticing Arin is alone, and they approach her, and tell her if she's teamless, how about she joins them since they only have 7, she would make their party 8. She apologizes and says she'll go in alone, and they call her crazy, saying she'll be disqualified. And she tells them she can do it, because Juhyuk said it wasn't difficult. They try to tell her to wait, but she goes in alone. We see the teachers watching from a monitoring room, we see some students with barely any points, and the homeroom teacher comments on how harsh the exam is, and how quickly they are being graded, and we learn that Sankil is actually a legendary contractor with a 99% clear rate for dungeons. So he knows exactly what to look out for, and this is why he can give scores so quickly. We hear Sankil thinking that overall it's a good year, and that the 5th generation children are doing well, but among them, there's a standout student. Soyeon, and we see her giving clear instructions to her team, allowing them to fight as a group. Some archers shoot the monster they are fighting, and after he blocks their arrows, Soyeon leaps at it, killing it instantly. Sankil is impressed with how well she coordinated the attack with her group, and if she does well here, then it's just a matter of time until she's back at the top. If it wasn't for Juhyuk, her record wouldn't have been ruined. He wonders how Juhyuk is doing, and we see the machine wasn't able to find him in the dungeon, and he's shocked to see that he's actually already finished, by himself, without a party. Sankil wonders if the time Juhyuk got is possible for a high schooler. He decides to watch the recording, and we see a group of enemies rushing at Juhyuk, and he runs straight at them. He quickly kills a pair of goblins with one thrust, and then slices one of the enemies off the ceiling. But is greeted by 2 giant mobs, and they swing their weapons down toward him, destroying the floor. But he dodged it, and we see him in the air beside them, and kills them both with 1 slash. The instructors are shocked by his performance, and we see Juhyuk standing in front of an armored golem, and Sankil comments on how it's a special golem made specifically for the midterm, and was made to fight a group of 8. The golem swings his arms at Juhyuk. Juhyuk rears his sword back and thrusts it at the golem, knocking its head off. And he realizes first place is going to Juhyuk. We see some of the other students coming out of the exam, as well as Soyeon, Seok, Arin, and our boy Juhyuk. The midterms are now finished. In the teacher's break room we see the homeroom teacher, who is currently looking at the exam rankings. Of course Juhyuk is first place, followed by Arin and the others. He seems shocked by the results, and begins to have a flashback talking to Sankil about the results. He says it isn't what they expected and Juhyuk came in first place. Sankil says it's quite unexpected, because he figured Juhyuk would get first place, but not the fact that he beat the dungeon solo without taking a single bit of damage. The homeroom teacher recalls Ju-hyuk clapping the goblins during his class, and Sang-il says if he grows up and enters the industry, Korea will retake its title as the one. The homeroom teacher asks if he means the title given to the world's strongest contractor. Sang-il says he's right, and that maybe it's because they haven't had many geniuses in a while, but he is excited. The teacher says the unexpected thing about the exam was, but Sang-il finishes his sentence by saying Arin's name. Adding onto it by saying that while Jo-hyuk's time is already nuts, they didn't expect Arin to ratio Soyeon by completing the dungeon solo. Albeit she got injured a lot, she cleared it alone. He knew she was a quiet, hard-working type of person, but he didn't expect she was the type of person to clear the dungeon solo. And if this exam focused on teamwork, Soyeon would have gotten a better score. However, since it was focused on contribution, that's why the rankings are that way. He also says he doesn't recommend the way they cleared the dungeon to regular students, because they are just built different. The homeroom teacher agrees with him. Back to the present, he says he saw her when he was an executive at the Kwijin Guild, and she had the aura of a model student who only practiced swordsmanship, but wonders why she cleared the dungeon alone. He then wonders if it's because of Ju-hyuk. He instantly shoots the thought down, wondering what he is thinking, saying he should just get the grades ready. The next day we see some of the students looking at their exam ranks, among them is Rockdale, who is high-key mauling at Ju-hyuk getting first place. He asks his attendant Yuri if Dizra is in Korea right now. She says yay. He tells her to call him immediately and prepare to head out. Later in the day, we are now at Jamsil, in Seoul, inside of a coffee shop. Rockdale and Yuri enter. Rockdale is surprised at someone calling out to him. We see it's Dizra. He tells him it's been a while. They are sitting at a table, and Rockdale looks nervous as Dizra is munching away at some steak. He's hesitant to speak. Dizra asks about Ju-hyuk, wondering what he does. Rockdale says nothing much, he's just a brainless freshman from a nursery school. And that he is asking Dizra for help because Ju-hyuk disgraced him. He tells Dizra to please make him pay. Dizra gets serious, asking if he can kill Ju-hyuk. He says that's up to him. Dizra says it's different from last time, and he has to prepare the board properly. Rockdale is lost, while Dizra points his finger at Yuri, saying, because of having to deal with her a long time ago, he had a big fight with the palace family. And that he isn't sure if it's because there aren't many people in the palace family, but he had to kill some of them due to rumors spreading too far. Yuri is frightened by him. He says the people over at Valhalla are different, and it'll be difficult to get in and make a mess. Rockdale says he understands, and he will do his best to set the stage for him, so not to worry about it. Dizra laughs, telling him to prepare a nice reward. A week later we see Ju-hyuk holding a request to leave Valhalla to have a walk. Barky asks if it's an application to go outside, and he says yes. Barky says, didn't they let you leave once already? Ju-hyuk says yes, but they are allowing him to leave again. Barky says, come to think of it, he heard that if you were to do well on a big exam such as midterms or finals, you would be given another chance to leave, and he guesses that's why Ju-hyuk is asking. Ju-hyuk says yay, he doesn't want to waste the opportunity since he needs to look for his notes. Barky asks where he is going. It cuts to Suwon, and we see Ju-hyuk walking in the woods, thinking that he thinks it's the right area. Someone yells at him, and he looks up to see Dizra smiling at him, saying it's nice to meet him. At the market, we see Kat looking out of a window. They sigh, and quickly notice a notification from their constellation asking when the ring will arrive. He replies saying it's on the way, and will arrive via portal. He gets spammed by notifications from the constellation saying he's lost his mind. He wonders what is going on, saying he's been researching whether or not it's an artifact from the era of destruction, but it's the first time he has seen this type of reaction. He gets surprised and looks over to some box arriving from some portal thing. He says it's finally here, and hopes giving it to them will make them be quieter. He opens the box to look at the ring. We can see that it is giving off a purple aura. He holds it in his hands, telling the constellation it's arrived. But the constellation doesn't react, which confuses him. He calls out to it again, making the constellation send a notification saying it's here. Once again spamming him with it. Back to Suwon, we see Ju-hyuk squaring up with Dizra. Ju-hyuk asks who he is, and he replies by saying, do you need to know? Ju-hyuk says he assumes he wants something from him. Dizra says correct, why else would he have come to find him on a remote mountaintop? Ju-hyuk asks if that something has to do with getting rid of him. Dizra smirks, saying he has good senses. Ju-hyuk takes off his backpack, saying, it's not about his senses. Dropping it on the floor, saying anybody would know the moment they saw him, and that he figured it out a few days ago. Dizra gets upset at him, saying for someone ranked first in Valhalla he seems like an idiot, and to not disappoint him, while rearing back his fist. We see him swinging at Ju-hyuk, but he dodges, causing Dizra to smack the tree instead. We see the tree is cracked because of it, then it slowly falls over. He tells Ju-hyuk that he has good luck to have dodged that, and if he didn't, he'd be done for. Ju-hyuk says it's not because of luck, just that his punch was slow. He thinks to himself that Dizra is quite strong, probably on the same level or stronger than Seok, and that's it's still dangerous for him to stop a punch that's strong while his body is hella frail. He smirks, saying the strategy is simple. He starts to haul cheeks away, which confuses Dizra. He chases after Ju-hyuk, asking if he's running away. And that for someone in his position it's a good choice to run away. We see him getting closer to Ju-hyuk's back, saying he'd have been beaten to death if he didn't do anything, but of course he won't let him get away, while rearing his fist back again. Ju-hyuk stops himself, saying, "Man, are you using your brain at all?" punching towards Dizra. He is shocked, wondering when he got so close because he didn't notice until his fist was in front of his face. He eats the punch being sent flying away. We can see his face is hella red, and he groans while landing on the floor. He is shocked because Ju-hyuk goes to stomp on him, but he quickly rolls to the side. As Ju-hyuk's stomp dents the dirt, Dizra is shocked by this. Ju-hyuk says, "Look at this," and repeats Dizra's line about how he has good luck since he dodged that. This pisses Dizra off, and he stands up, wiping the blood from his nose, asking Ju-hyuk what he did to become so strong. He says, "Don't you know already, that I am ranked first at Valhalla?" Dizra looks a bit scared, wondering what drugs Ju-hyuk did to become so strong. Dizra has a flashback to when he was a kid at the Ventric family mansion. He says they used his talent to raise their status. We see him shotgunning some potions. He explains by saying his talent is his innate propensity towards elixirs. Due to his talent he was able to negate any side effects from chugging elixirs, causing his parents to dump hundreds of millions per bottle. We see a bottle breaking, and at the age of 16 he became stronger than an adult. He says his parents wanted to use him to gain recognition from the family, but Dizra had other plans. He didn't want to live his whole life under their control. We see he killed what I assume are servants, due to his overwhelming power, and because of his power he didn't care about his family's recognition. However, this upset the head of the family, and she kicked him out. But he didn't care, saying in such a dark world whenever he got a commission most of his problems would be solved by the money. He was able to become more bold after the ties with his family were severed. And when he got the request from Rockdale he was also offered money, but his interest in Ju-hyuk was bigger. He got first place in the entrance exams, and he heard he was a madman who used abusive language to the guild scouts. He wonders how amusing it will be to play with Ju-hyuk like a toy. So he tried to entertain himself. But now he is feeling fear toward Ju-hyuk, wondering just who he is. He calls out to Ju-hyuk, continuing his question before the flashback about what kind of drugs he's been taking, saying he doesn't think there's any cheap elixirs an orphan like him could buy. Ju-hyuk is confused, and bursts out laughing. Ju-hyuk, wiping his tears due to laughter, asks if he means drugs like steroids, or trenbolone sandwiches. He calls Dizra a drug-abusing cheater, which causes him to snap. Dizra asks if he is saying that he didn't get stronger using elixirs, while shaking with anger, like a chihuahua. Ju-hyuk says, "Of course not, you junkie, I became this strong through training and exercise." And in a way he could compare Dizra to Seok, but he thinks it would be rude to compare someone who isn't a junkie to one. Dizra starts molding, saying Ju-hyuk is done for. He grabs the handle of a dagger, thinking he doesn't have the power to use it here, but he draws it anyway. We see he has a purple aura around him, as well as the dagger. Ju-hyuk recognizes something about the magic power, though he doesn't say what. Dizra says he can feel his power growing, and calls out to Ju-hyuk while his eye glows. He says, "Did you really think I would let you go so easily?" but is interrupted by Ju-hyuk jumping towards him. Dizra gets kneed in the face, while Ju-hyuk asks if he is a nuthead. Because what kind of idiot waits for their opponent to charge up? I guess they don't have Dragon Ball over there. Dizra groans as he lands against a tree, smacking his head on it. Ju-hyuk doesn't give him time to react and dashes towards him, preparing a punch. We see it hit him square in the face again, breaking the tree behind too. Dizra groans in pain, and starts to say wait, while we see Ju-hyuk's hand in the air, grabbing his hair, which confuses Dizra. Ju-hyuk says he can't go, losing his mind, yet calling him an elixir chugging idiot. He says he would have forgiven him if the only thing he did was pick a fight with him, but Dizra said he was going to take care of him, so he can't let him go yet. Joo-hyuk also says he has something to ask. We see Dizra eyeing Joo-hyuk's fist as he closes it. Joo-hyuk tells him to keep his teeth clenched while swinging his fist towards Dizra. He screams for Joo-hyuk to wait. It's now later and we see Rokdal in his room, thinking that by now Dizra would have taken care of Joo-hyuk, and considering his personality he probably killed him too. He thinks it's a pain to clean up after Dizra, but at least it isn't on school grounds. He's glad Joo-hyuk left at such a perfect time. Rokdal calls out to Yuri, telling her to get a car. She says yes, but Rokdal notices that Dizra is calling him. He picks up asking if he got rid of him, but there isn't a response. Rokdal calls out to him, and all he hears is Dizra screaming, while Joo-hyuk says he bets Rokdal has no idea what's going on, considering how scared he is. We see Joo-hyuk holding the phone in front of Dizra, while he groans. Luckily for us and Rokdal, Joo-hyuk is fluent in groans and translates for us. He says, if I die, I want you to burn 2 incense sticks for me, so to wait for him, which scares Rokdal. Joo-hyuk calls out to Rokdal, but he hangs up. Joo-hyuk wonders why he hung up without answering, calling him rude. He stares at Dizra, wondering what to do with him now. It jumps to someone pouring tea. We see it's Yuri and she tells Rokdal it's ready. But he doesn't respond, as he looks deep in thought like post-nut clarity just hit. She repeats herself, but he yells at her to leave it there and get lost. She says understood, placing it beside him. The man has low-key turned into a stalker, repeating Joo-hyuk's name over and over again in his head. He says he never would have thought that even Dizra would get clapped, even after what happened with Ririk. He wonders what to do next, because he knows Joo-hyuk understands that he's the one behind it all. He thinks maybe Dizra let it slip, calling him trashy, and at this pace it's only a matter of time before the news reaches the Ventric family. He thinks it's gotten too out of hand. The clarity kicks in. He realizes it might not be a big deal because Joo-hyuk is from a lowly background. So that means he won't be able to get to the family, but just in case he shouldn't come forward about this for a while, he'll just keep an eye on him for now. Back to Joo-hyuk in the woods, Barky starts talking to him asking if Dizra forgot to bring his brain before coming here. Joo-hyuk thinks for now there's nothing more for him to do, so he will keep this incident to himself. Barky asks why he didn't just kill him, and he replies by saying if it was his past self he would have done it, but now he would get into trouble if he did it, because he's a high schooler. Barky says there's something he's worried about, and brings up the magic that Dizra used earlier, saying it felt strangely familiar to him. And if he released more of it, he could have confirmed it, but he's definitely senses magic like that before. He then asks if Joo-hyuk felt anything. He says 300 years ago, monsters sacrificed dogs and cows to use that king of black magic. Barky says he guesses Joo-hyuk isn't skilled at distinguishing people by their magic, but it's okay since it's a harder skill than people think. Joo-hyuk tells him to shut up, asking if the hidden side of the blade the guy was talking about is related to that power. Barky says maybe. We get a flashback to earlier. Joo-hyuk asks Dizra who told him to look for him. He just groans like a zombie, and Joo-hyuk forgot his jaw got dislocated when he punched him earlier. He says alrighty, while sticking his thumbs into his mouth saying this might hurt a bit, popping his jaw back into place. Dizra groans while Joo-hyuk stands back up. He repeats his question again. Dizra hesitates to respond, and Joo-hyuk sighs. He crouches back down saying, I readjusted your jaw to let you answer. He grabs Dizra's hand asking him if he really thinks staying silent is the correct thing to do. Dizra is lost, and asks why he is holding his fingers. We see Joo-hyuk break his fingers, causing Dizra to scream in pain. Joo-hyuk tells him to answer quickly, before he snaps the fingers on his other hand. He rats out Rokdal, and Joo-hyuk says he was wondering if it was him or not. He asks Dizra who he is since he came on the request of a brat, pointing out how he doesn't look like a student from Valhalla. He is confused Joo-hyuk is asking that, and says he might not like it, but he will find out one way or another. Joo-hyuk asks if he wants him to break more fingers. This scares Dizra and he answers saying he is Dizra of the first species. He takes commissions as a mercenary. Joo-hyuk recalls the name, first species, but doesn't know where he heard it. He says being a mercenary must be fun, since you're a bully who gets paid. Dizra asks if all mercenaries look like trash to him, and that he is just a guy with good luck. He starts to explain that the constellation the first species worships is called the hidden side of the blade, and if he could have charged up for 30 seconds the results of the fight would be a lot different. Ju-hyuk calls him a bastard, who loves blabbering. Saying he would have let him be if he shut up, and told him who he was affiliated with, he shoves his thumbs back into Dizra's mouth, saying he sounds better silent. We hear the sound of Dizra screaming. Later we see Ju-hyuk on his phone googling the first species, and says as expected everyone agrees they are evil, and he is quite upset, because he couldn't find his notes. As well as the fact that Rockdale keeps trying to make him look shady. He wonders how to screw Rockdale over, and since he is in this day and age he should use modern techniques. First he recorded all of Dizra's confessions, so all he needs to do is find a place to upload it. We see a phone Ju-hyuk is calling. It turns out to be Lilia. She notices and picks up. She is super excited, asking if he finally agrees to begin working as her assistant, but he tells her that isn't why he is calling. Instead he is wondering if she knows any news reporters. We are shown a news article that is talking about the incident. It includes pictures of Dizra being escorted by police, as well as Valhalla's response to increased security. On some bulletin board someone is saying they will clear the confusion surrounding the Ventric family's attack on the student. They don't mention Ju-hyuk's name in the article at all. There's too much wall of text for the recap, but it just explains the series of events that has happened so far. The commenters seem to have figured out that it's Ju-hyuk and they praise him, while slamming the Ventric family. Ju-hyuk smiles as if he won some Twitter beef. Barky comments that he has adapted pretty well to the recent culture. Ju-hyuk responds saying he did have a hard time at first, but he mainly focused on getting used to everything by scrolling through people's posts and watching the news. Thanks to all of that he is now acquainted with modern culture. However, he thinks it's a pity, he was just trying to mess with Rockdale, but all the journalists rushed to publish their articles bashing the Ventric family. He's also surprised that the reporter Lilia introduced him to seems to be quite a big shot, because he didn't expect the story to blow up this much. It cuts to the announcement from the Ventric family's position, and we see the head walk onto the stage, bowing her head while everyone snaps pictures. She starts by saying, first of all she would like to express her apologies towards the student who was attacked, and the Valhalla Academy. The following statement is the Ventric family's official stance on the matter. The assailant was insubordinately carried out by Dizra, who has been excommunicated from the family. And in his confession he claimed that Rockdale gave the order, but Dizra later testified that this was a lie, just an attempt to escape his current predicament. Therefore they believe the Ventric family played no part in this incident. Although this attack was committed by an excommunicated member, he did once belong to the Ventric family, so as the family head she will personally visit the victim and apologize in person. Although Rockdale can't be directly connected to the cringe, they assume he might have been connected to Dizra, so they will summon him to the family house, and conduct their own investigation. So the Ventric family will work hard to ensure no one doubts them anymore. She bows and starts to head off stage, but someone calls out to her asking if she is going to take questions, asks what kind of apology she will give the student who was attacked. We see this as a video Rockdale is watching on his phone. He looks scared shitless, because his father is calling him. He reluctantly answers, and his father tells him to come to England for a bit, that it's a family order. He is mauling hella hard, while Yuri does her normal NPC stare. The next day, we see someone watching a YouTube video of Dizra. He says the Ventric family is right, he is the sole perpetrator. It turns out to be Ju-hyuk, and he wonders if he is swallowing his pride. He says he just can't stand the Ventric family. He dreads the fact that the Ventric family head is coming to apologize in person, because it's going to be hella awkward. He stops in front of the teacher's room, debating on if he should ask that person. At the Valhalla Cafe, we see Lilia, who is full of joy, while Ju-hyuk tells her no. She jumps out of her seat saying he doesn't even know what she was going to say. He tells her it's obviously going to be her asking him to be her assistant. She pouts, asking why she called him, when she is so busy. And quickly asks if this is a date. He tells her to stop dreaming. She says now that she thinks about it he isn't speaking formally. He tells her it's how they have been for a while now, and he didn't call her because he's bored, but rather he wanted to thank her for introducing him to the reporter. So he will give her some information on dealing with monsters. She is happy. He adds by asking if he tells her, will she help him leave the school grounds this weekend? She quickly agrees. And says if he becomes her assistant he'll be able to leave every day. He stutters, saying he's not doing it. It takes us to the Pacific Ocean, and we see a prisoner transport ship. Of course it's for Dizra. He says he didn't think he'd be put on a ship, treated like cargo, wondering if he is being transferred to the prison tower. We learn it's a person in the middle of the ocean, that an S-grade constellation created themselves. It turns all contractors into normal people. He says it doesn't matter, all he has to do is be quiet so Rockdale can stay in the Ventric family. Because if he does that, then his sentence will be reduced to only 5 years. Because 5 years is nothing. Someone says, "What an ugly face," shocking Dizra. He looks over asking who said that, but we see a slash, turning Dizra into a sprinkler. Dizra is shocked, and groins in pain. He looks over, we see someone holding a dagger. They say to die, since the first species doesn't need someone like him. Dizra lets out one final groan, and decides to take a nap. The man just stares at him, then slowly begins to fade away. At the Ventric family mansion, we see the head is pissed looking at Rockdale, and his father, Eden, they are both bowing to her. She calls out to Rockdale, he hesitantly says yes. She asks what he plans to do, which confuses him. He quickly apologizes to her, she says is that it, asking if his apology is supposed to fix anything. She tells him to tell her in detail why he committed such evil acts. It skips the talking. She says, "So you wanted to get rid of Ju-hyuk?" To which he says yes. She grips her chair, saying is that really the explanation he is giving her, while releasing some of her aura. She continues by saying he acted on his own because he believed that Ju-hyuk insulted the Rockdale family, but in reality it was just his own pride that was hurt. As a result, Rockdale was the one who caused the Ventric's name to be dragged through the mud. She leans over him, asking what should they do. Scared, he drops onto his knees begging, saying he will do anything to restore the family's fallen honor. She asks what he is talking about, because the only way to restore the family's honor is to excommunicate him. Eden asks if she means it, because isn't that too harsh of a punishment, but she interrupts him asking if he would like to be excommunicated instead, causing him to hesitate. She thinks to herself that she'd rather have him killed, or excommunicated this instant, but that would make it known that Rockdale was definitely the one who ordered Dizra to kill Ju-hyuk. She holds back her anger for now. Calling out to Rockdale, we see he is shaking. She says she won't excommunicate him for now, so return to Valhalla, and keep quiet. After she meets with Ju-hyuk she will think it through more thoroughly. Rockdale thanks her, she tells Eden to keep an eye on his son, since his punishment will be based on Rockdale's actions, then tells them to get out. While they are walking through the hallway, Eden tells him to stay quiet, and to not do anything. Rockdale asks if his father was even listening, because he's going to be excommunicated sooner or later. He says he will release that when nobody expects it, since right now the media is watching them. But before that he has something to do now, since nothing is slowing him down. He tells his father that he must help him, but he looks hesitant. He reluctantly agrees by saying whatever it is, keep it quiet. A few days later we are back at Valhalla, in the interview room. We see the homeroom teacher telling Ju-hyuk that the Ventric family head will be coming soon, because she wants to apologize. Ju-hyuk says he has nothing to do with the family head, and she even said the incident had nothing to do with the family. The teacher agrees, but says it's morally correct to apologize, she's even coming all the way to Korea. He thinks to himself that the Ventric family wants to carry out Rockdale's punishment themselves, and that she is probably coming to see him because she has no other choice. He is hella annoyed. The teacher says to be honest, him and Sankyil are also pretty upset about the situation. Because a student of Valhalla was attacked, and the attacker confessed that he was ordered by Rockdale, but they are trying to belittle Ju-hyuk's confession to save their reputation, just trying to cover up the truth. Whatever the truth may be, for the protection of their students Rockdale, or the family's head needs to be kicked out. But not too long ago the Ventric family donated a large sum to the school. And he can't believe most of Valhalla's funding comes from donations from big families. So the school will probably turn a blind eye if they're given enough money. Ju-hyuk says he sees, he'll have a talk with the so-called family head. The homeroom teacher is shocked, because he gave such a normal reaction. Ju-hyuk says he's always been normal. We see a knock at the door, the homeroom teacher says he will go let her in. He tells Ju-hyuk to have a good chat since he'll be leaving now. He opens the door for her, and bows, saying to please take her time. She thanks him for his hospitality. We see her and Ju-hyuk staring at each other, she says it's nice to meet him, introducing herself. He says nice to meet you too. We see the family head sitting in front of Ju-hyuk, and they awkwardly stare at each other. She says regarding Dizra's attack, she is deeply sorry, while bowing her head. He says it's okay because Dizra is being excommunicated. She starts to bring up the fact that Rockdale has been bothering him at school, but he tells her it was just once so it doesn't matter anymore. He also tells her that since she announced Rockdale had nothing to do with Dizra, he has nothing else to say. Which shocks her. She says even though they said that no one believes them, Joo-hyuk thinks that nothing they say is true. She continues, saying she wants to create an opportunity to resolve this misunderstanding. She asks if he could help, but he instantly turns her down. She figured he would say that, and promises that if he helps he'll have her full support, until he graduates. Even offering to recommend him to a guild sponsored by the Ventric family. He says he just has to make a statement to end all of this, and that they must be really desperate, giving him this much to make him shut up. This pisses her off. He adds to his words saying he is mad since she's making it out like nothing happened, so why does he have to play along? He just wants to see her live with the dishonor Rockdale gave her. She is fuming, calling him scum, releasing her aura asking who he thinks he is talking to. He says it must have been hard holding back her true colors. She says she came to this cesspool of a school for him, but he is too arrogant. She should kill him right now. She was trying to be generous and give him a chance, but he's throwing it away. He tells her to try it, which confuses her. He says she's the one who claimed their family had nothing to do with the attack, and to further their lie they wanted to buy him off, even threatening to kill him now. He says he guesses this is all she can do, which further agitates her. He says even if she attacked him, she wouldn't be able to kill him. She releases her aura, and stands up, leaving the room while saying she will make him regret his actions today. He says she couldn't do anything so she's all bark. Barky then asks if it was necessary to do all that. He says he hates people who think they should be worshipped. He knows what she plans to do, since she's scum that tries to put leashes on everyone just like Barky. He stands up thinking since there's no more classes today he should go to the training room. A bit later we are at the stadium, and we see Joo-hyuk on his phone. He notices something, Arin talking to her older brother. He asks her if she really thinks she can win, no matter how hard she trains it's useless. He says if she wants to remain in the family, don't come to this weekend selection test. Since he doesn't want her to get humiliated. She tells him no, which upsets him. He starts barking at her, saying she can't comprehend what's happening. She begins to speak and we hear Joo-hyuk cut her off saying he's the one who doesn't get it, calling him a dipshit. He is confused asking who just called him that. Joo-hyuk points at him repeating what he said. And says who wants to stop somebody who's putting in so much work. He asks who Joo-hyuk is since he doesn't know him, and is swearing towards him. Joo-hyuk says he doesn't care who he is, so if he's done talking then to get lost. He asks if Arin agrees, and it takes her smooth brain a minute, but she starts nodding her head. Arin's brother is upset, but he leaves saying he will see her at the test. She thanks him, but he says it's fine, they should just go train. She says earlier when he asked if she agreed she had something else in mind. He asks what it was. She begins to say she would have made a your mom joke, but he tells her to stop since that joke is an L. He tells her he won't be able to train over the weekend, so they will work extra hard today. A few days later we are at Shihyung in the mountains. We see Joo-hyuk walking, and Barky asks if he came to look for his notes again. Joo-hyuk says yay. Barky brings up his relics and storage stones asking if he even needs to look for the other notes then. Joo-hyuk says he's right but he wants to know how many notes are left. He also thinks something amazing could be hidden in the notes. Barky wonders what he is talking about, while Joo-hyuk thinks if he finds it then any shortcomings he had in his past life he'll be able to overcome them. He says maybe if he found Barky earlier than 300 years ago, he wouldn't have killed him, which confuses Barky. We are taken to Arin's family, because today is the day of the test. We see reporters outside, then Arin, and her brother in front of their father. He says the selection test will begin, whoever passes will be recognized as the successor. Her brother is low-key dripped out. He says whoever fails will be banished from the family. He asks if they are ready, to which they both say yes. He says the task for this test is to find a dual blade hidden in the mountains. The first one to do so will be the winner, and it doesn't matter how they obtain it, but killing is strictly forbidden. He tells them to begin, and Arin starts hauling cheeks while her brother Devil May Cry walks, thinking it's not an urgent test. Since the moment she finds the blade, he will just take it from her. He has a flashback to yesterday, after walking away from Arin and Joo-hyuk. He gets a phone call from someone with a gold tooth asking what happened to the dual blade. He says he has to take the selection test, so it will take longer. The man appears irritated since Arin's brother is late. He apologizes, asking if he gives him the blade will he keep his promise, but the man interrupts him saying of course it's a promise made in front of a constellation. So to just focus on the target. Back to the present, he realizes it's his last chance, so he should start finding it. We see Arin kneeling in the woods. She says she can feel the trace of the dual blade's magic, and thinks it'll only take about 15 more minutes. But of course her brother appears, asking if this is the direction of the blade, shocking her. He asks if she's finding it with magic traces, wondering who taught her that skill. She tells him Ju-hyuk, having a flashback to when he taught her it. He says he thinks she understands the basics, since she can change her aura to thunder she should know them. He tells her to practice small magic-oriented controls, instead of big ones, which confuses her. He asks if her family didn't teach her. She looks sad while nodding her head. He says it's fine, and asks if she only knows how to borrow the power of the constellation. She agrees. He says he isn't good at it either. He begins to explain what she needs to do. He tells her to start spreading her magic slowly, as if she was examining all the magic in her body. Next, try to feel it in the air. We see her aura. She starts to sense his energy, and it shocks her. It exhausts her, and he asks if she already sensed it. She says yay, that she saw the magic surrounding him. He tells her that's how you sense magic. It's one of the many things you can do with precise magic control. The more she uses it, the easier it will be. He says if the magic's appearance looked like him, you can tell what kind of magic traces are on objects as well. And if she continues training, she will even be able to see silhouettes, but he can't teach her anymore, so to learn by herself. She looks happy and says okay. Back to the present, we see her douchebag brother again, asking just who Ju-hyuk is. Calling him the shameless guy who was with her before. Saying he looked stupid, so he's surprised he's talented. This makes Arin angry, causing her to say he's much stronger than him, asking why he's here. I guess her brain is still smooth. He grabs his sword, asking her why she thinks he is here. We see a purple aura from his sword as he unsheathes it. Their swords clash and he says this is why he's here. He is shocked, because Arin is actually pushing him back. We see him wince in pain as his sword is knocked back. He is lost, asking what is going on, wondering when she got so strong. We see Ju-hyuk in the woods searching through the ground with his mana too. He wonders if there's no note here either, and he hid so many notes yet he's only found one. We see the magic react somewhere, and he is glad because he finally found another. He quickly glances into its direction, which is deeper in the woods, but in the same direction we see two auras clashing together, Arin and her brother. It takes us over to them, and they are exchanging a flurry of blows. Her brother looks nervous. She spots an opening and prepares her attack. We see he blocks it, causing his hands to shake from the recoil. He is surprised, asking if she's learning to be a wild boar at school, since she is physically stronger now. She tells him to give up the blade, making him ask if she is insane. He rushes in towards her, saying an illegitimate child like her doesn't deserve it. We see Arin charge up an attack. She readies her blade. We see her brother is now closer and she swings towards him. Mid-swing she rotates her sword, changing the direction of her attack, knocking his sword out of his hands, sending him backwards. She keeps the pressure up, preparing another attack, hitting him directly in his stomach. He falls straight to the floor. She sighs out of relief, surprised by herself. She figured she would get a hit on him, just didn't expect it to be a critical hit. She starts to get ready to pick up the blade, but of course her brother asks if she really thinks she won. We see him standing beside her, releasing a similar aura to Dizra, shocking her. He says he told her before, her blessing is pathetic, and she will never beat him since he has a contract. He says she got a hit when his guard was down, so he will give her props. The purple aura shocks her. She asks if he's a villain, asking him why. He repeats her question, dashing in, saying why do you think? We see Arin swing her sword at him, but he ducks under it, preparing his attack. She is shocked he dodged her attack at such a close distance. We see him release his aura, slashing her stomach, sending her flying away, crashing onto the ground. He stands over her, asking if she's going to get up, but says it's probably better if she doesn't. She looks down and is shocked to see her stomach is cut. She holds her wound, wincing from the pain. He tells her if she moves she will die. She asks if he made a pact with an evil constellation. He says since he's the offense leader of the Jinsig Guild, he signed a contract with an A-grade constellation to save his reputation, and he is now on the side of the devotees. She looks shocked, since she recognizes the name as the third most dangerous evil group in the world. She says she doesn't understand why he made a contract with one of the devotees' constellation, wondering if there's benefits or something. He says it comes with incredible power, command, and deviation from the need for senses. As always, Aaron is lost, can't say I fully blame her here. He continues saying he joined the Jinsa Guild at 12, he has been working as their family's guild icon. When he just wanted to play, he was forced to set an example as the eldest son. The only reason he's still in the guild is due to their father's surveillance. And when he was a teenager, he met someone from the devotees, and the man encouraged him, saying he could satisfy all the desires he has. He says maybe the man already knew his temperament, the fact he finds joy in breaking people. However, he couldn't just join them that way, he needed a condition, which is the dual blade. And if she just gave up, there wouldn't have been a second test. She is confused, this is the second one. He says their older sister Ajahn partook in the first test. She says she thought she went missing. He tells her she went missing during the test, because he couldn't properly control himself. He murdered her before even looking for the blade. But he wasn't able to find the blade, so he failed the test. He says their father found her somehow, and attempted to save her, even though he left her there hoping she would go missing. Aaron asks where she is now. He tells her if she wants to look for her then quit. Because Aaron's mother collapsed seeing her sister's face in her. He says he knows where the dual blade is now, so she should say hello to their sister, preparing his attack. We see it get close to Aaron, but her brother is shocked to see that Ju-hyuk blocked it. Ju-hyuk asks what he is doing. Aaron's brother says it's family business. Ju-hyuk upset says what kind of family, points knife at their sister's neck, knocking him away. We see he lands against a tree. Aaron is surprised to see Ju-hyuk, and calls out to him. She asks why he is here. He thinks he only came for his note, but notices Aaron's wound. He tells her he had business in this direction, and she should gather magic to heal her wound. She smiles saying okay. Her brother recognizes Ju-hyuk as the guy who was rude to him at Valhalla. He dashes at Ju-hyuk telling him to screw off. We see he imbues aura into his sword, thrusting at Ju-hyuk, but he dodges. Aaron's brother is confused by the fact he dodged it. Ju-hyuk says, when you stab, you shouldn't aim for the person standing still, rather the person dashing towards you, hitting Aaron's brother directly in the face. While he is falling, Ju-hyuk jumps above him, preparing another attack. He is shocked that Ju-hyuk is so relentless. We see Ju-hyuk's attack hit him in the stomach, creating a giant crater in the ground. Man is out cold. Ju-hyuk stares at him. Ju-hyuk asks Aaron if she is okay, to which she says yes. He asks if she can walk. She says she isn't sure. We see the purple aura behind Ju-hyuk. He turns around to see it's coming from Ju-hyuk. Barky recognizes it as sword magic. We see Aaron's brother standing up calling Ju-hyuk a bastard. He jumps at Ju-hyuk asking if he thinks a freshman can beat the guild's offense leader. We see Ju-hyuk block his attack effortlessly. This irritates Aaron's brother since he even used magic. Ju-hyuk calls out to him while preparing a punch, asking if he chose a different position because it fits him, sending him backwards. He groans from the pain, wondering if Ju-hyuk is really 17 since he's so strong. He says he can't help it, and he has to use that. He mentions how there's a lot of side effects, but if he keeps getting hit he will be done for. He smirks nervously while holding a purple crystal, saying he can get a temporary contact with a constellation. He nibbles on the crystal, while Ju-hyuk just awkwardly stares at him. He starts laughing all edgy like he just watched Death Note, releasing his aura. At the selection test site, we see the reporters feel an earthquake, and they point in the direction of Aaron's brother's purple aura. Their father recognizes it as sword magic, as well as the fact it's coming from the area where the dual blade is. He says it's tradition to not get involved in the selection, but the aura is dangerous so he should check it out. Back to Ju-hyuk, he is confused asking if all he did was increase his power. Aaron's brother calls him stupid saying it's just an extra effect. Due to the power he gained from his temporary contract. A status window appears saying, the dragon that kills all recognizes the holy relic, and descends. The constellation activated his ability on Ju-hyuk, causing him to turn into a chibi version of himself. He deactivates his ability in disbelief, turning it back on, seeing it's still the same. The dragon starts to sweat, dropping bricks. Another status window says he has to leave, causing Aaron's brother to be confused. A status window appears saying the dragon rejects the call of the holy relic, and he will terminate the contract. Aaron's brother is lost, as the dragon takes back its power, leaving. Ju-hyuk says, who is killing Hu while placing his sheath onto Aren's brother's stomach. He smacks the back of the handle, causing Aren's brother to drop his sword, and spit up blood. He eats the floor while Ju-hyuk stands over him. It cuts to the gold-toothed man, who is revealed to be Han Nibal the Dragon King, as well as the devotees' leader. He looks shocked. The constellation says because of him he got into trouble. He angrily asks Han if he wants to disappear. He stutters, trying to apologize. He slams his head on the floor, saying he is sorry. The constellation tells him to stop spreading the artificial relics, and he quickly agrees. The status window tells him to behave well, and it fades away. He stops bowing, wondering what just happened. He can tell right away that something has gone wrong regarding the artificial relic, and thinks about what the constellation said about it getting into massive trouble, wondering if maybe it's scared. He looks serious, saying he must find out what's going on. At the Valhalla dormitory, we see Ju-hyuk entering his room. He sighs while taking his backpack off. He reaches into his backpack, smirking, thinking he finally got his hands on it. Showing us a technique book called the God Arts. Barky questions the name, and Ju-hyuk says it's the main reason he's been searching for the notes. Explaining that it's a breathing technique, used to raise one's magical power. Barky asks if there's a difference between it, and the one he used before reincarnating. Ju-hyuk says his previous breathing technique was garbage, because he just bought it from the market. Barky says he sees. Ju-hyuk thinks that when he found this he couldn't use it due to the trash breathing technique being entrenched with his body. And due to this poor technique, he got hurt fighting Barky because he ran out of mana. He smirks, saying now he can start anew, but he needs to stop training his physique for a bit, since he has to learn the God Arts first. Barky asks about earlier, wondering if it's okay to leave Aren with her crazy brother. Ju-hyuk says he heard someone coming so he left. We get a flashback to earlier, when Aren's brother was eating the dirt. Barky asks if he killed him. Ju-hyuk thinks he can't kill him, due to the previous incident at Valhalla. Since there's some magic traces left he will survive. Ju-hyuk asks Aren if she can stand. She says yay. He goes to give her his hand, to help her up. But notices someone is coming, and figures it'd be awkward if Aren's family saw him. He tells her that her family is coming. So don't overdo it, and just chill. He also tells her to tell them that she caught her trash brother. He tells her bye, and she says she will see him at school. Back to the present, he is laying on the bed. He says as soon as he masters the God Arts he will get the remaining storage stones. Since last time he couldn't take all of the magic power in due to his bad capacity. But for the rest of the day he will rest. At Aren's family, we see them having a meeting. They discuss the news articles claiming the family are related to the devotees. He says he can't believe this, and they also received a letter from the association. He says while they stayed silent regarding the Ventric family issue, they can't do the same here. He asks how Aren is, and someone tells him they sent her to the hospital. Her wound is sizable but the bleeding stops, so nothing too serious. He sighs in relief. One of the people says there's new articles about her being a genius since she clapped someone from the devotees. There are some who compare her to Ju-hyuk too. The family head is surprised the articles are happy she fought against her own family. Someone else says, shouldn't it be a relief the next family head is chosen, and the articles will strengthen her position? He agrees, but thinks it's strange she defeated her brother alone. He has a flashback to when he arrived at the scene. He is shocked to see the defeated Jingun Aren's brother's name, and Aren. She tells her dad that he came at her with evil magic so she knocked him out. He says he can see that, but how did she beat him since he saw a lot of magic power? She hesitates while the security guards help her. Then says that Ju-hyuk taught her. Back to the present, we see he is looking at the article where Ju-hyuk flipped off all the paparazzi. At Valhalla, we see Ju-hyuk in class. He notices Aren, and thinks that he thought she would be hospitalized, but she looks fine. She turns around, and waves to him. One of the NPCs behind Ju-hyuk thinks she is waving at him. His friend tells him to snap out of it. Ju-hyuk has a flashback to practicing in his room, but his phone starts vibrating. We see it's Aren texting him, saying her doctor forbade her from training. He says from how badly she was bleeding it's to be expected. He responds to the text telling her to do as she pleases. Once again, she spam sends him emojis, which irritates him. Barky tells him there's something he should know, that the black magic they encountered felt familiar. And it's not like he forgot it, rather something is preventing him from remembering it. Ju-hyuk asks if it's the person he mentioned last time. He says possibly. However, he isn't completely sure. Maybe if they finish the second condition it'll help him remember. Ju-hyuk remembers the status notification mentioning the Eye of the Great Forest. He thought it was just an area used for performance, but it's also where the final practical exam is, and the lowest scoring students are expelled. He frustratedly wonders if all he can do is wait for the finals. Back to the present, he says he needed time to get used to the breathing techniques, so he will look for the Eye of the Great Forest instead. The homeroom teacher comes in telling them to take their seats, because there's an announcement he'd like to make. He brings up some inter-school competition next month, asking if they remember. Ju-hyuk looks annoyed that it's coming up. The teacher says their school is thinking about who to select, and plan to choose so by the highest scores from the final exams. He tells Ju-hyuk to follow him to his office. He's confused and Soyeon looks at him. In his office he says it seems like they meet here often. Ju-hyuk says, well yeah, it's because you keep calling me. The teacher says that's true, and starts to talk about Ju-hyuk participating in the competition, but he immediately says he refuses, shocking the teacher. Ju-hyuk asks what the competition is for anyways, and the teacher begins to explain that the top 3 schools pick several first years to take part in a competition, which includes sparring, escaping a labyrinth and much more. We see Ju-hyuk yawn, can't blame him. He says he understands if they win they'd be showered with rewards, he just doesn't care. The teacher is shook, and asks if he really needs to head into the Eye of the Great Forest so soon, which surprises Ju-hyuk. The teacher tells him that's where the exam will take place. As well as those who pass will be exempt from the final exam, but if you fail you'll have to try again during finals. Ju-hyuk smirks, saying he'll enter the competition then. At the Ventric estate, we see Adalia asking how preparations are going. The guards tell her they are going smoothly, but will most likely need another month. She asks if Rockdale is doing anything, to which they say no. She says to alert her if he does anything irregular. He says there's some news regarding a building made out of dollar bills in the market. Adalia wonders what Black Cat is thinking by making such a building. She gets a status window that says her constellation wishes to speak with her, which confuses her. At the market we see Black Cat watching the construction, wondering why the constellation is asking them to make it. We see Hex Maniac say it's a gift, she doesn't specify for who. We see Cat's constellation say it's a gift, but doesn't say who, confusing Cat. They start to think of who it might be, and the constellation asks if they found the person who sold the ring. They say not yet, all they know about them is their basic face structure and voice. Since the customer's contact information was recorded they are currently searching all records. The constellation spams a notification saying to hurry up. At the Valhalla teacher's room, we see the homeroom teacher stressing. Sankyil approaches asking if he's chosen his members for the competition. He says he has. Sankyil asks to see the list. We see it's obviously Ju-hyuk, Arin, Soyeon, Seok and someone else named Yoongjin. I low-key don't remember if he has even appeared yet since he is from a different class. Sankyil says it's unexpected that Ju-hyuk is participating. The homeroom teacher says at first he was against it, but after hearing that it'll take place in the Eye of the Great Forest he changed his mind. Sankyil says it's strange since people normally hesitate hearing the name. The homeroom teacher says maybe he doesn't recognize the name. Sankyil says that makes sense, since he is always asleep in class, but thinks to himself that it feels as if he is attending school for ulterior motives. He asks if he can gather the students for some training. The homeroom teacher agrees, saying he will free up their schedules. A few days later we see everyone sitting together, still can't remember the green-haired guy. Sankyil comes in, greeting them. He says they probably saw him during the midterms, but introduces himself as the combat instructor. He says they are gathered here since they are all partaking in the competition, so he's going to explain the training they will do. There will be 3 tasks. The first is a duel between the students like their enrollment test. The second task is a team fight, going against 5 members from another school. However, it's not a 1v1, but all 3 teams will fight at once. The final task will be in the Eye of the Great Forest. He says he can't give them much information about it since they pushed the final exam date up, but he can tell them that it's a labyrinth. It's as you would imagine, a forest. The only entrance is a heavily guarded gate. After entering the forest each team will be given a unique task on the same day. He goes over the specifics for the team fight, but Ju-hyuk tones him out, confused that Sankyil spoke so little about the forest. He wonders if he can't just rush in due to the barrier, thinking it doesn't seem like it'll be easy. Thankfully it skips him talking about the team fight, and goes straight into what type of training they will do. Before continuing he asks if there's any questions. Joo-hyuk raises his hand asking if he can train alone. The teacher says he doesn't see an issue with it, and Arin says she will also train alone. Sang-il is a little confused that Arin also requested it, and asks if anyone else has questions. Awkwardly no one responds, so he says that's all for today, saying he will see them tomorrow. Everyone starts to leave except Arin and Joo-hyuk. Joo-hyuk thinks to himself that at the very least he will have mastered the new technique, so he will be in top condition, and all his extra time will be spent training. Arin calls out to him, asking if she should take part in the training. He asks why she is asking him, since she said she would train alone. He also brings up how she said she couldn't train hard due to her injury. She has a flashback to her and the homeroom teacher talking. He asks if she is okay participating while injured. She waits a moment, then asks if Joo-hyuk will. Confused he says he heard he will. She immediately agrees after hearing that. He asks if she will be okay. She says she will be fine. Back to now she thinks she is closer to being the family head, saying, thanks to Joo-hyuk she has found another goal while looking at him. That she wants to be stronger with him, and help him achieve what he wants. Just like he helped her. He asks why she is staring at him after she suddenly stops speaking, calling her creepy. He says since she can't train hard, they will focus on mana control, telling her to stick to light walking and try to keep all activity to a minimum. He leaves saying once he's done with his work he will help her more. We are taken to a spooky building. Someone screams for mercy. He says he will give them whatever they want, so to please let him go. We see a Baldy smile, then yeet his knife into the man. He slumps over, and Zarya from Overwatch asks if they could have just ended it quicker. We learn they are from Il-shin-ja, their names are Lisa and Al, but I will just call them Zarya and Baldy. Zarya gets a notification on her phone, surprised they have a new order already. Baldy asks if it's a new target, to which she agrees. We see on her phone it's Joo-hyuk. Baldy asks why their group, Samsel, is going to kill a student. Zarya tells him they are being paid a lot. Baldy asks her when the deadline is, and she says during his inter-school competition. Baldy asks if they can't just do it now, and she explains to him that the school's security is tight, and too dangerous. He says if the other top schools will be there, won't it be harder for them? She says that one of the assignments will be held at the Eye of the Great Forest, which is a maze, and the students will be tasked with going through it. And there won't be anyone but a surveillance drone, and a few guards at the entrance of the maze, while the teachers watch from a monitoring room. Baldy says they'll just need to wait for Alia to infiltrate them, which is no fun. Zarya tells him this job is their top priority. We see it skip a month later to the first day of the competition. Rockdill is sitting in the stands, anxiously waiting. He recalls a flashback of him talking to his father, telling him about how he paid for a commission for the Il-shin-ja to kill Joo-hyuk. This surprises his father, but Rockdill tells him they won't be able to link him to his actions, and it should be a sure deal since the Samsel accepted it. We learn how they are an elite assassination group, which includes 3 people. His father tells him not to stand out, and the flashback ends. Rockdill says since they've already said they'd take Joo-hyuk out here, he doesn't need to watch anymore. Then tells Yuria it's time to leave. As they leave, the chairman begins his speech to everyone coming to watch, and introduces himself as Shim Dio-kwon. He says it's time to introduce the representatives, and he introduces China's White Lotus, the heroes from the States, and finally, Valhalla. He says the competition will last for 3 days, the first task is individual sparring, and tells everyone to go wait until they are called up. We see Sang-il watching, thinking about something, until someone calls out to him. We learn it's the hero's instructor named Jack Rover, who says it's been a while. Sang-il says it has been, calling him 3rd place. Jack says Valhalla wasn't even in 1st, and Sang-il says that's true. Jack says this year will be different, as the heroes will take 1st place. Sang-il asks what makes him so sure. Jack asks him if he knows the pinnacle of all contractors, the one. Sang-il says he does, and it's the one called Destroyer. His real name is Logan. Jack tells him that Logan's son is a freshman, then points him out. We see Logan Jr. Sang-il says he's looking forward to seeing what he's capable of. Jack tells him that he's already made a contract with his father's Constellation. Sang-il asks if he also uses the same powers as his father, to which he says yes, but obviously not as well. He also says he's heard the students of Valhalla this year are no joke, especially Ju-hyuk, who caught a villain. Sang-il says that Arn is the same too. Jack says they'll be good matches for Logan Jr., seeing as how he can beat adult contractors easily. Sang-il doesn't really react. Jack says that's lame. The first participants are revealed, and Sang-il says that Jack will understand his reaction after the match. We see it's Logan Jr. and Ju-hyuk. They both stand on the stage, and Dio-kwon explains the rules for the tournament, saying that they shouldn't be afraid of fatal injuries due to the stadium's protection system, and to get ready to fight. Ju-hyuk wonders why they are using a protection system, and Barky tells him they need to be in top condition for the third task. The countdown ends, and Ju-hyuk quickly leaps at Logan, but is surprised when his punch is caught. Logan asks if he thinks he is strong. Ju-hyuk says no, and he has a long way to go. Logan says he's more modest than he thought, then attacks, but Ju-hyuk blocks it, saying that it's not really important since he's still growing. Then asks how much longer Logan can withstand his blows. We see him lift Logan into the air, then ready his fist, hitting him in the chest. Logan says that blow was heavy. Ju-hyuk says he's tougher than he thought, as he expected him to be knocked out with one blow. Jack, watching this, is surprised, saying he's watched Ju-hyuk's admission video, and he wasn't this crazy back then. Then he inhales copium, saying it's not over yet since Logan hasn't used destruction yet. We see him glowing yellow, then readies his palm attacking Ju-hyuk, but it gets dodged. It burns some of his hair off, which causes Ju-hyuk to kick him, asking what he's doing. He wonders if it is a smashing ability or something similar. Logan says he feels as if he's about to faint, and if he can't land a hit, there's no point in using his skill. Then he has a lightbulb moment. Realizing what to do, he double palms the floor using his ability on it, shattering the floor beneath him. Ju-hyuk asks him what the floor did to deserve that. Then Logan raises his foot, stomping the ground to cause the debris to fly up, because he thinks that if he can evade the attacks due to sight, he just needs to attack from a blind spot. Ju-hyuk sees him anyways, which causes Logan to realize he goofed up, but he says it's too late while attacking at Ju-hyuk, but instead gets hit in the face by the debris. Ju-hyuk says he hid behind the tiles, but it's easier for him to find Logan since he's attacking with magic. His fist then greets Logan's face, sending him flying into the wall, thus ending the round. Jack is hella surprised, as Sang-il says this is why he's unfazed. Because Ju-hyuk is a monster, it begins to speedrun the matches, as we see Ju-hyuk one-shotting his next opponents, one after another. Until the final match, in which we see it's Arn. She tells him that it looks like their academy is guaranteed to win, so there's no reason for this round besides to establish ranking. She says the winner will receive a scholarship, but she doesn't care for it, so should she concede? He says he doesn't care either, but don't concede, and she should show him how much she's improved, so go all out in this match, and he'll account for her injury. She says, understood. While readying her sword, we see her draw it, and Ju-hyuk prepares to punch her. Then we hear a thud, as everyone watching is completely surprised at the outcome, and we see Arn planking on the stadium floor. Ju-hyuk is announced as the winner, and Barky calls him ruthless. Ju-hyuk says he held back, and didn't hit her stomach, and forcing her down was an improvisation. Because her blade's trajectory suddenly aimed at his stomach, so he struck it down with his fist. But he's happy he's become stronger, and now he can actually hold a bit of mana, and that Arn has become stronger too. We see at night time, Sang-il tells everyone they did well, asking if they are all okay. They tell him yes, and he says thanks to the protection system, it seems they only have some scratches, and he'll tell them about tomorrow's formation. Ju-hyuk says this is a waste of time, wondering if he needs to wait before he goes to the Eye of the Forest. Sang-il concludes the meeting, and tells them to get a rest. As he's walking down the hallway, Ju-hyuk calls out to him, and Sang-il is curious as to what he wants. He asks Ju-hyuk what he wants, and Ju-hyuk asks if he finishes the team battle early tomorrow, if he can continue with the last assignment immediately. Sang-il asks if he means the Eye of the Great Forest, saying it's never happened before and he needs to check the rulebook. He says there are two rules: if the student finishes before, and is early, the student may proceed to the next assignment at their teacher's discretion. Or, if the venue hasn't been appropriately prepared for the students, they can prepare to carry out the next task. Ju-hyuk says, since it's his discretion, what does he think, asking if he can move on to the next assignment. Sang-il says if he does finish early and comes to the staff room, he can move on to the forest. Ju-hyun says okay, then says he'll see him tomorrow, and Sang-il tells him good night. Barky asks if he's planning to finish the forest in one day too, and Ju-hyuk tells him yes, since he has no time to waste. The next day at the team battle, Dio-kwon greets everyone saying today is a mock battle, and 5 representatives from each academy will be facing off against each other, and the audience will have to watch from the hologram due to the terrain. We see a drone in the air, above the Valhalla students. Soyeon is wondering when Ju-hyuk is coming since it's starting soon, and then plot convenience ensues, and he arrives. She asks if he knows what time it is, and he tells her he overslept a bit. She says he was meant to be here early. She continues to chew him out, and he says sorry, and that he'll take care of everything. She tells him it's a team battle, and he tells her he knows. She says even if he won the individual battle, both schools will be aiming at them, yet he wants to go alone. She asks if anyone else has complaints, but everyone stays silent. Arin says excuse me, then asks Ju-hyuk if she can go with him. He tells her to just stay here, and Soyeon starts to mold. He tells her to stop barking, and to save her energy. She's confused, then Dio-kwon says it's about to start. Ju-hyuk says he has something to take care of in the afternoon. Soyeon asks him what he means, but he walks away. She tells him to answer. He calls her noisy, and he has to prepare for the forest. The countdown ends, and we see the White Lotus group preparing for something, but Ju-hyuk quickly emerges from the bushes. They realize who he is, telling everyone to get ready. He says she reacted faster than he thought. Then we see a message appear saying White Lotus was eliminated. Logan is shocked by this, saying it's only been 10 minutes, then says Valhalla must have zerged them. One of his teammates tells him that he's sensing magic approaching. Logan asks if it's the guys from Valhalla, and he says no, it's just one person. Logan instructs his boys to keep up their magic shields, and for his other members to support them by enhancing their magic, and reinforcing their shields. We see them all in formation, then one of the girls, Melissa, says it's only one person asking if this is needed. Logan says if it's Jugyeok, then yes, and the other girl Ibella says she doesn't know since she didn't fight him, and he's very skilled. Melissa says Logan is too, and he tells her that Ju-hyuk is just built diff. One of their guys says the magic disappeared. Logan wonders if they left, and we see their formation from above, as Ju-hyuk appears in a tree. He says found you, and Logan looks up only to be greeted by Ju-hyuk smacking him in the face. Logan falls to the floor, and Ibella goes to turn around, but gets hit with domestic violence, no jutsu. Melissa prepares the restraining order, but he dodges it, and hits her too. The other 2 men try to attack him from behind, but he quickly turns around, hitting one of them in the side with his sheath, using him to beat the other dude, taking out the entire team from heroes. We see they are eliminated, and Ju-hyuk says now he can move on to the forest. It cuts to Chief Lee in the monitoring room, wondering how the hell this happened, since it only took Ju-hyuk 23 minutes to win, and 20 of the minutes was him traveling. And now it's a problem as it ruins the schedule. Sang-il says from what he remembers in the rules, they are allowed to begin the next game on the same day if there's enough days. And that he would like to discuss progressing with the next game, with the other teachers. Chief Lee says alright, just let him know the result. Sang-il wonders if this is why Ju-hyuk asked him about this the other night. It cuts to him and Jack walking. Jack says the heroes don't care about proceeding, but they still need to talk to the White Lotus. Jack says he was convinced from the team battle, that the final result won't change even if they delay it. And that he now knows why he called Ju-hyuk a monster. Sang-il says he understands, and that they can go talk to White Lotus. It jumps to the Valhalla waiting room, and everyone is sitting there. Soyeon stares at Ju-hyuk saying that he's insane for soloing the battle. And she wanted to take some initiative, but she couldn't do anything in the end. She also brings up how she lost to Arin, then she wonders if it's because of her lessons with Ju-hyuk that she won. She starts to feel like she's being left behind, and she wonders if she gave up her ego, if he would teach her. They start to get told over the speakers that tomorrow's game will be held today instead. So to prepare and get ready for the last game. Ju-hyuk calls out to everyone, saying he has something to say in advance. He says that he will go to the Eye of the Forest himself. Everyone will be on their own, but if they need help to yell for him. Soyeon starts to think about how they already won the last 2 games. So they'll have to get the lowest score in order to lose, and how the Eye of the Forest is mostly about the environment. So they don't need to worry about the monsters. Ju-hyuk asks her if she has something to say, calling her Birdie. She starts chirping, asking what he means, and he says she's proving his point. Aaron thinks it's a cute nickname. It skips to later and they are at the eye of the forest. They are all standing before the labyrinth gate. Dio Kwon picks up the mic and starts rapping. He explains that the audience can watch this match just like the last, but he would like to tell them something about the labyrinth. Mostly the content of the game, and the evaluation criteria. He explains again that the eye of the forest is where it will be held. It's a maze shaped like a forest just as the name implies, and it has a unique environment, where it never stops raining. While the monsters are low-leveled, there are many threats. And that it will be a true test of survival. They'll judge everyone based on how well they survive. They'll have their conditions checked, then after 5 hours whoever is the closest as to when they went in will have the highest score. Combat is also prohibited. He finally says it's time to begin the game and the door opens. Inside of the Valhalla abandoned warehouse, Lisa and Al get told that the students entered. And we're introduced to Alia, who was mentioned before. She puts her hands on their shoulders, saying there's magic blocking them at the main gate. And it has 2 people who are maintaining it. Al says they'll just kill them first, then they disappear into a purple light that Alia created. We see a monitor get cut off, and Sankyil is surprised as all of the cameras inside the eye of the forest are malfunctioning. Chief Lee is surprised too, saying it seems Seuss. He asks a guard if they've called the main gate. He says yes, but nobody is picking up. Sankyil says that the students might run into problems, so all of the teachers should enter. Chief Lee agrees, then we see them all running and they are surprised as they see the main gate collapsed. They wonder what's going on, then it cuts inside of the eye of the forest. We see the students from Heroes hiding from the rain, and Melissa informs Logan that Yubella doesn't look good. We see her lips are bluish and she says she's alright. Logan warns her that if she gets hypothermia she'll be eliminated. He decides they should build a simple hut to avoid the rain better, and he gets them to pick up materials. He says that he'll level the ground and dig a hole. Then he sees a purple orb appear in front of him. The Samsel group appears from it, and complains about the rain. Al says it's time for Juhyok to die, which makes him cringe when he realizes he isn't saying it to Juhyok. He barks at Alia, and she says that she just teleported to a moderately strong magic source, since she can only find him with that. Logan wonders what the hell is going on, wondering why they need Juhyok. But notices that it's black magic, then he wonders if they are villains. Lisa tells Al to clean up any witnesses. He says he knows. Logan prepares for a fight, and yells saying this is no place for bastards and goes to attack. But gets scrunked on as Al appears behind him, and stabs him in the back. The blade goes through his chest. Logan turns around surprised, then asks when he got behind him. Al says he doesn't seem to understand, saying to look in front. Then he realizes that there are 2 Als. He says that's right, and goes for the next attack and stabs him in the front this time. Saying that it's called duplication. Logan drops to the floor. I'm sure he'll walk it off. Lisa asks if he's dead, and Al says he'll just let him bleed out. They then hear a scream, and see Bella standing over Logan. Lisa asks Al when he'll stop letting witnesses walk up, and he says he'll handle it. And he throws some shade at Lisa, then rushes at Ibella. It cuts at that moment to Juhyok running through the forest, and he wonders where the house is from his quest thing he is. He wonders if there's even a house here since he only sees bushes and trees. Then he spots Melissa. And she's obviously scared, while screaming no over her classmates' bodies. No idea if they are dead, but Lisa asks if this is a comedy skit, since another one appeared. Al then notices that Juhyok is here now too. Lisa says looks like the target came on his own. Juhyok wonders about the target remark, then looks down to see everyone taking naps. Juhyok tells Melissa while he's clapping these side characters, that she should try and control everyone's bleeding. He tells us they are still alive, and he wonders why they are being left to bleed out rather than instantly killed. He tells them that they've ruined his mood, so he goes to ask them a question. He asks if they snuck in here. If they did, he'll make it quiet. Al says he clearly doesn't know the situation he's in, since he's stuck in the labyrinth. Since they smashed through the only door here, and broke the drones. Juhyok says the teachers must know then, and Al says they won't be here in time. And it'll take them at least an hour to clean the gateway up. Juhyok says a single hour in this non-stop rain, he has to find the house in an hour. Al says he's not sure what he's talking about, but die. And launches an attack with his duplicate. The Al going for backshots misses and hits the floor, and is surprised. He wonders where he went, and looks up to Juhyok saying they're dead. Then he hits him in the nose with his sheath. This sends Al flying backwards past the other Samsel members. He hits his head on a tree, the others are surprised, Ju-hyuk quickly leaps at them and smacks them both in the back of their heads. They both start to lose consciousness, and join their friend on the floor. Lisa low-key ate shit. Ju-hyuk tells Melissa to use her magic and heal the injured. If she isn't able to handle it, then run west as the Valhalla students are there. She says she'll try her best first. Al then wakes up, and sees the others on the ground, confused about what happened. Ju-hyuk says his colleagues are quite frail. Al grabs his knife, and gets ready to fight. Ju-hyuk says he has to ask one thing before killing him, then asks who their client is. Al asks what kind of assassin would give his client up, and Ju-hyuk says the others he met spat it out instantly. Al starts to plan his next attack, saying that he'll attack him with his duplicate first this time. Which Ju-hyuk easily dodges. Al is surprised since there was no presence to be detected. Ju-hyuk calls him a coward, then smacks the duplicate. Al quickly takes the chance to attack, but gets elbowed in the nose. As he's reeling from the hit, Ju-hyuk calls out to him, asking him again if he wants to name his client. Al asks if he thinks he's a joke, and Ju-hyuk says he clearly is. And smacks him, this time sending him really flying, crashing through trees. The teachers finally make it into the forest, to find Melissa and the Valhalla students healing the others. Jack quickly runs to Logan, asking if he's okay, to which he says it's just slightly difficult to move. Jack is relieved that he's okay, and Sankil asks what happened. Logan explains how he got attacked by villains, and there were a total of 3 attackers. Sankil wonders if it's Samsel, then asks where they are. Logan points over to the side, and we see the wreckage from Ju-hyuk one-shotting Al, and the others still napping. Well, we see Lisa and Al. Logan informs them our boy defeated them all. Sankil wonders if Ju-hyuk was this strong. Logan tells them that he only saw him fighting as he was losing consciousness, but it was incredible. And extremely one-sided for Ju-hyuk, and when he fought him in the tournament he didn't even use half of his power. He thought he was the strongest out of the high schoolers, but seems like it was just arrogance. Jack tells Logan to cheer up, since Ju-hyuk is just an anomaly. Sankil notices that Alia is missing, and they say that Ju-hyuk went to fight her. We then hear our boy say here, and drop her onto the floor saying he tried to find out their goal. Sankil asks him if he's okay. To which he says he wasn't hurt. Sankil says alright and that they can hear the details at the academy. Sankil then tells everyone the teachers will help move the injured to the hospital, and that the Valhalla students will find the White Lotus ones to let them know that the competition is over. At the Valhalla dorm we see Ju-hyuk fresh out of the shower, saying that it was a hard day, and he wonders why there was so much to do. Barky asks if it's because he had to use magic to fight the villains. Ju-hyuk says maybe, since he used a lot of mana. But he was happy with the performance. We see that he somehow made it to the house and got the bead. He pulls it out of his pocket, showing it off. We get a flashback to Alia on the ground, and she's complaining about how her head is hurting. Ju-hyuk tells her to wake up, and she immediately sits up to see him. He asks her what her ability is. He tells her that he's not sure where she hid, but she must be part of Samsel. He explains how the other 2 were fighters, so she must be a supporter instead. She looks surprised, and he tells her that she must have an assassination ability, asking what it is. She begins to form her bubble from earlier, saying she has no intention to tell him. But he stops it from forming entirely, and she's surprised that he's able to stop it. Ju-hyuk tells her that now he's seen it, he understands. And that her ability is to create space and move within it. But he says that works out well, and he needs her help since he has something to find. If she does well, nothing will happen to her. Turns out that's how he got the bead. Barky says that Ju-hyuk didn't keep his word to Alia. He replies saying that she didn't tell him anything about her comrades or employer, and if she confessed nothing would have happened. Ju-hyuk starts to think about who their client could be, and he pieces together that it must be Rockdale. He starts to think about what he'll do if the Rockdale family pulls some shit like this again, but he got the bead anyway, so it's time for what follows. He sees on the status window that it says he must sleep to find his memories. He's confused by how easy it is, and Barky says that if Ju-hyuk finds his memories, he might get some of his too. Since he also got a notification, Ju-hyuk decides it's sleepy time. While he's laying in bed, he is confused since he doesn't think he's lost any of his memories. So he closes his eyes wondering what he'll find, and it cuts back to the Tower of Destruction, and it's right as the tower began to crumble. Right as a piece goes to hit Ju-hyuk on the head, time begins to stop and it zooms out a bit to show Barky on the floor too. And a red shadowy figure appears, saying that they'll take good care of Yun-Oh's name, along with the names that Ju-hyuk protected in this world. Then it vanishes and time resumes again, and crushes Ju-hyuk. He quickly opens his eyes, wondering what the hell just happened. He's confused still about the whole memory thing. Then he asks Barky if anything came back to him. Barky says he thinks he was a tiger. And Ju-hyuk says that's enough edibles. Ju-hyuk imagines a cute tiger, and Barky says it wasn't that cute. Ju-hyuk asks him if he remembers what it looked like, and Barky says he doesn't remember specifics. Ju-hyuk is curious if he saw the shadowy figure or not, but decides it's whatever. He asks Barky if he remembers his name, asking if he heard it being called. Barky says he doesn't know. Ju-hyuk thinks about how it seems like Barky only got painful memories, but he doesn't know his name. Then the status window appears. It mentions how there's a secret room in the Grand Palace, and to watch the truth. Ju-hyuk wonders about it, and decides that when he's done training today he'll ask Lilia about it. In the Valhalla gym, we see everyone is training. Seok is curling some heavy ass weight, and Soyeon calls out to him, asking why he's here, but rather he is confused why she's here. She looks shy, saying that she thinks her reason is similar to his. Since she's got a lot of pride, but she is jealous of Ju-hyuk. Seok says that isn't why he is here at all, he just loves going gym. Then he asks her if she's jealous of Ju-hyuk because she lost to Arin. Soyeon says yes, and she begins to recall her fight with Arin. She relentlessly attacked her, even imbuing her blade, and when she slashed at Arin. Arin raised her hands, then sliced Soyeon's attack, causing it to split in half. Soyeon was surprised her magic was cut with a blade, so she sent out 3 more strikes. We see them heading towards Arin, and she begins to use her lightning while preparing to unsheath her sword. She does some rapid slashes to counter the attack, and as Soyeon is confused like usual, Arin quickly leaps toward her, and slices her, causing her to drop to the floor, which is how she lost. She tells Seok that Arin became much stronger than she was at the entrance ceremony. And she thinks it's due to Ju-hyuk's guidance. So she's been training her magic power, and swordsmanship. But Arin is doing weight training, and nobody in her family trained her. So maybe that's why her growth is so explosive. Seok listens to her yap, then says she's better off telling Ju-hyuk that. Soyeon blushes, and realizes that he's right and she has to ask him directly. She approaches him, and calls out to him. He asks what Chirpy wants, and she asks if he's training Arin. She finally musks up the courage to ask him to train her too, but Sankil walks in, asking if he's busy. Ju-hyuk asks him what he needs. Sankil tells him to finish up here and come out, as someone is here to meet him. And they've said this will be the only time they're able to see him for a long time. Ju-hyuk says alright, and Soyeon gets embarrassed since she got interrupted without being able to ask him. She thinks about how embarrassing it was, then she hears Ju-hyuk call her Chirpy. He tells her if she wants to train, then asks Arin about the routine and do it with her. If she does well, he might actually train her. Arin then says she'll teach Chirpy well. Soyeon barks at her. Ju-hyuk begins to follow Sankil, asking who wants to see him. Sankil says there's only one person it could be, and Ju-hyuk has an idea. Then the door is open to reveal Rockdil and Yuri. He looks like he's aged 20 years. Ju-hyuk calls out to him, and Rockdil drops to his knees, begging to be saved. He continues to beg for him to help, and Ju-hyuk asks Sankil what's going on here. Sankil says he surely knows that Rockdil is the one who hired Samsel. Along with his previous assassination order, it was his second time trying to kill Ju-hyuk. And that the media rushed to Sankil to figure out what he knew. They've plastered stories about Samsel and Rockdil all over. Turns out Ju-hyuk leaked it to the press. He asks Sankil why he should forgive Rockdil when the Ventrix will just clean up his mess. Sankil says his family released an official statement, and that they've Order 66'd him. Along with Rockdil's father. And unlike before, the Ventric family hasn't tried to shut the media up. Ju-hyuk says now he only has jail time left, and asks Rockdil how he's meant to save him. Rockdil says there's still a chance, since Ju-hyuk's testimony is more important than the other evidence. Ju-hyuk ignores him, causing Rockdil to beg him more to tell everyone that nothing happened, but Ju-hyuk says he doesn't want to do that. Rockdil asks if it's because he hasn't apologized yet, then starts to cry and even drool. Gross. Ju-hyuk says he doesn't care for the apology, and Rockdil asks if he wants money. Of course the answer is no. Then Rockdil turns desperate. He turns around to look at Yuri, grabs her arm and asks him if he wants her. We learn she is a direct child of the palace family in England. Ju-hyuk asks him if people are just objects to him. Rockdil says that currently she's his possession. and he tells Ju-hyuk to look at her neck. We see some enchantment table runes showing off that she belongs to him. He tells Ju-hyuk he can give her ownership if he'd like. Sang-il gets angry seeing that she's being sealed like this, since it means she cannot act against her owner, and he begins to wonder who casted it for him. Ju-hyuk says people like him have existed for a long time, people who put taboo spells on others and sell them for profit. Ju-hyuk grabs at the runes, and begins to imbue his hand with mana. Then he pulls the runes off her neck, causing her to scream. But we see that they slowly begin to fade away. They are surprised he broke the seal, and Ju-hyuk asks Sang-il if it's alright to punch Rockdil just this once. Sang-il asks if he thinks a teacher would tolerate violence between students. Then says it's different when the other person is a suspected criminal. So he'll cover Ju-hyuk, so deck his ass. Ju-hyuk grabs onto his shoulder, then tells him to clench his teeth, and very gently taps him on the nose. And we see him on the floor taking a nap. It cuts to later, as Ju-hyuk is walking away. Barky says he thought they'd kill him this time, since he was so angry about it. Ju-hyuk says that if it were 300 years ago he'd be dead, and among his disciples there was a guy who did something similar to a slave. And that's why he was so worked up. And how he's been in a similar spot before. Barky realizes that Ju-hyuk must have been a slave, but gets interrupted by Yuri calling out to him. She's pretty gassed out. She tells him that earlier she was flustered, and couldn't thank him fully. Then bows to show her thanks. Ju-hyuk tells her not to bother thanking him, and that she should just live as she pleases. She starts to tear up and cry. While he continues to walk, she says yes. It cuts to the next day after school. In the school cafe, we see Lilia telling Ju-hyuk that the grand palace he's looking for is in China. She eats her food, saying to be precise it's a labyrinth owned by the White Lotus group. Ju-hyuk asks if he's in the same group from the school competition. She says yes. Ju-hyuk thinks about how it's illegal to enter a labyrinth owned by others. How it's weird that people own them now, when even dogs used to be able to enter them. He could destroy it if he wanted to, but it'd be awkward since it's owned by an academy. He asks her if there's a way in. She says that it's open for the White Lotus students, and she goes to say something else but stops herself from saying it, since she's said too much. Then she asks how he can just sit there listening, without giving info in return. He asks her what she's talking about, then she holds 3 fingers up, saying she just wants 3 pieces of info, then she'll tell him more. He gets up, telling her to enjoy her coffee. She tells him to wait, and she'll just tell him. He sits back down, and she sighs out of relief. Then tells him it's meant to be a secret, but the Grand Palace will be one of the stages in next semester's world competition. He asks her if all the teachers know about it. She says not yet. And he asks her how she knows about it. She replies that she has a source only she knows. His follow-up question is if it's similar to the school competition. She says yes, and that it's more akin to the Olympics. He thinks about how annoying that will be, and that the second semester is too long away. So he asks her if there's any other way to get there. She's a little surprised, then says she's unsure since she has no connection to the White Lotus group. So it'll be difficult to say or not, and she doesn't know if such a thing could happen. But she asks him to help her with something, and to come with her to the World Monster Research Society. That was a mouthful. It then jumps again to North London, and they're at the Research Society. Ju-hyuk barks at her, asking why they came all the way here for a day. She tells him that it'll be for the weekend, and Monday since she got permission. He tells her she's abusing her power, then asks what they are doing here. And it jumps again to him standing in front of a monster, while some people watch over it. We get a close-up of the monster's cheeks, then it runs at him, while we learn he's here to just kill monsters for Lilia. He stabs it in the head, causing it to disappear. The researchers tell him to prepare for the next monster, and he's annoyed it isn't over. It cuts to an hour later and he's complaining on the couch. He asks why she said he'd only need to kill 3, but had to do 10. She awkwardly says no, and he asks her what's with the atmosphere here, since as soon as they entered the building everyone has been yelling at each other, while giving them the cold shoulder. He asks her if she fought with them. She takes a sip of her tea, then says yes, and it's uncomfortable since they've been dead set on how they hunt currently. But now a new paper appeared, contradicting everything they've agreed upon. Ju-hyuk says that the little test he went through was old-fashioned. Lilia tells him that it's just how the association does things. Ju-hyuk asks her why someone else here didn't do the verification. She tells him that they are all boomers, so none of them wanted to do it and have their theories debunked. And that the current monster hunting theory has a ton of nepotism. Ju-hyuk says that's gross, and asks why they need to submit papers constantly. She tells him that a paper without society's recognition is nothing. No matter how close they may be to the association, their focus is the perfect hunting strategy. They'd endure anything to find that. Joo-hyuk says that since he's helped her plenty now, he'd like if she would help him. She says alright, and it was a good decision to come here. Since the White Lotus chairwoman is here. And that she usually stops by the association, and she probably came by to watch earlier. Joo-hyuk says since Lilia knows what she looks like, then they should go talk to her while they got the chance. They get a knock on the door, and we hear a woman asking if the student Joo-hyuk is there, and if they can speak to him. Joo-hyuk realizes the plot convenience is kicking in. Then the lady enters the room, she says excuse me, and we see a pretty woman that introduces herself as Sol Yun, the chairwoman of the White Lotus group. Joo-hyuk introduces himself, and then Yun asks him for a favor. She asks him if he can take care of someone. Lilia says since the conversation seems to be getting serious she'll take her leave. Then she exits the room. Joo-hyuk asks her what she needs him to do. She explains how her Seoul family were the first to be founded after the era of chaos, which is how they are able to build the White Lotus so successfully. However, there was a genius in the family, but they were closer to that of a natural disaster. At just 13 they stood atop everyone else, trampling their sisters and members of the Seoul family. Even the family head was defeated, which led to the person concluding that there was nothing to learn from the outside world, and locked themselves up in the training room in the White Lotus Palace. Joo-hyuk asks if that's who he needs to take care of. Yun says yes. Joo-hyuk says he'll do it, but he's confused why she's asking him and not someone stronger. He even points out how Yun's magic power is quite strong too. Yun tells him he has good eyes. She says that she used magic to hide it, but there are two reasons. The first is that the person fights using solely their physical power. The second is that the person is the same age as Joo-hyuk. After watching the competition she knows he's strong physically, so if the person were to lose to someone their age their pride will be damaged. Which is why she came herself to ask for the favor. Joo-hyuk says he understands, and hopes she's not asking him to do this for free. She says of course not, then goes to ask how much he wants. But he interrupts her saying he doesn't want money, and that there's a place he'd like to go instead. It cuts to a little after and they are in China now, in front of the White Lotus Group's building. Joo-hyuk tells her he didn't expect to do this the day he agreed to it. Yun says that he said he was free till Monday, so the quicker the better. He agrees, then she asks him if the place he needs to enter is the Great Palace. He says yes, then she tells him that it won't be a difficult request. But they should enter first. As they walk in some of the students look surprised to see her walking. Then they enter a room, and he tells her he's curious about something. Yun asks what it is, and he tells her it didn't feel like she paid attention to the competition. But she wants him to deal with this person. She says she understands what he's talking about, but there are a lot of people who foolishly tried to fight this person, only to realize the limit to their talents. Both students and teacher, that's why Yun's top goal currently is to rid this person of their arrogance. Then Yun will lead the White Lotus group to the top. Joo-hyuk says he gets it. She then tells him that everything is here, and that when he steps onto this magical seal he'll be transported to the Seoul training room. He says alright, then steps on it, then asks Yun what the person's name is. Yun says that the person's name is Yen Long. She looks like a tiger. Lang asks Joo-hyuk who he is, asking if he was sent by the family to get her to leave. She says she won't, so get lost. Joo-hyuk calls her out for being rude to someone they just met, and leaps at her saying she must be crazy. He punches at her, but she catches his fist. This surprises him, then she hits him back with an aura-imbued palm strike. She calls him an idiot, asking if he'll continue to underestimate his opponent, then mocks him for his punch. He tells her they should introduce themselves. She's surprised he's not injured. Then he grabs her wrist, and rears his fist back for another punch. She puts her hand up to block the hit, and he hits her forearm causing her to feel pain. She quickly distances herself from him. Asking who he is, he tells her that he's a 17-year-old high schooler who underestimated his opponent. She decides to keep her distance and look for a counterattack. He doesn't give her the chance and closes the gap. Then readies another punch, hitting her directly in the stomach. He begins to have fun, saying she realized that dodging wasn't possible, so she moved backwards with the blow to reduce the impact. He says she isn't bad, and he felt it when he let her hit him. Even his students back in the day didn't have that level of mobility. Lang starts to think about how someone her age is on the same level as her. She starts to smile out of excitement. Since he's so strong it means she can go all out. He decides that since she still has some pride, he'll knock her down a bit. We see that they are being watched on a screen. It's Yun that is watching. Her secretary calls out to her, and says he knows it's presumptuous, but he wonders if Ju-hyuk will be okay, since he doesn't think that a student from another school could do anything to the White Lotus. He says that he's currently being overwhelmed, asking if he can really defeat Lang. And that he knows it is rude, but didn't Yun also lose to Lang? Of course that was without using magic power, and only physical. Yun says that's right, she lost to Lang once, and even if she used magic there's no guarantee she would have won, since the difference back then between their magic power was paper thin. He asks what she means, and Yun says since it was a few years ago. Lang has probably gotten even stronger both physically and mentally. The secretary says that surely makes it more risky, right? Since Ju-hyuk couldn't come close to beating him, Yun says who knows. He defeated Samsel as a student, and also came first in the competition, right? So he surely won't go down easily, it doesn't matter if he loses. It goes back to the actual fight, and we see her readying herself. And begins to rush in to prepare an attack. Ju-hyuk dodges it, but Lang quickly follows up with a knee attack. She feels it come into contact with something, and she goes to think that she's got him, but notices something wrong and screams while grabbing her knee. She asks him if he's got a rock as a head, and he says to no. Her knee came so suddenly he just headbutted it. So it means that his forehead is harder than her kneecap. Lang thinks about how even if she bombards him with attacks, he just blocks them all. She cannot see a path, and it hurts her pride, but his physical strength is greater than hers. Then she asks him if he's been fighting without magic. He tells her yes, saying that's what she prefers, right? She says to drop that, as she's going to unleash everything now. He sees her gathering magic, saying that since she's getting riled up, it's time to break her pride, and he begins to unleash his own magic power. Which scares her since there's so much, she's in doubt that it's a high schooler's power. And says there's no point in tricks anymore, then pushes off the floor, dashing toward him, deciding to end it all in one hit. She begins to accumulate her magic into her fist, and punches straight at his face. As she feels it come into contact with his face. She believes she won like last time, but is surprised to see him matrix dodge her fist. He tells her he's had enough fun for now, and it's time to end it. Then hits her straight in the stomach again, but this time with magic. She starts to lose consciousness, and calls him a monster as she falls over. Ju-hyuk exits, and tells Yun it's as requested. And he's brought Lang out after bodying her. Yun is in disbelief he managed to beat her, then asks if he's hurt anywhere. He says he's fine, but she might not be. Yun asks him how difficult it was. He says she was strong, but was disappointed due to the skill gap. Then drops her onto the floor. Lang wakes up from the fall and sees Yun standing before her, and angrily says her name. Yun says it's been a while, and they'll talk later. She tells Ju-hyuk it's time to discuss his payment, and that she can let him enter right now. He tells her good, and he'd like to go immediately. As they walk away, Lang watches, and the secretary tells her they should get her treated. Lang asks him what the name is of the guy who bodied her. Then she hears Ju-hyuk's name, even though he told her. I guess she ignored him. She says he's one of the strongest people, then thinks about fighting him again. It cuts to an edgelord hearing her say this, then back to Ju-hyuk, wondering if he's really in a maze, as he sees night figures. Yun informed him that the Grand Palace is a unique maze, that looks just like a castle. And explains to him that he needs to look out for monsters called living armor, and other than that there will be no difficulty exploring. He asks how long he can stay there, and she tells him around 5 hours. He starts to stretch, since he's under a time constraint. Then gets swarmed by living armors. It jumps to a bit later, and we see a living armor going to attack him, and he quickly slices it in half. And then it just falls into multiple pieces. He says that should do it, and we see that he's already defeated the rest. Then he wonders where the office is, saying he's searched more than 20 rooms. He wonders if he's finally made it there, then Barky tells him to turn to his right. And tells him that door most likely has an office. Ju-hyuk enters it, and sees a portrait off some dude, and says it's definitely an office. Then he wonders if it's Eliftri's, since it could be someone else's. Barky says it's the right one, and to look under the portrait and it has Eliftri's name there. He asks Barky how he read that, since the language is weird. Barky says he doesn't know either. Ju-hyuk says he just needs to search for the secret room, but it'll take a while to sit there and look individually. So he just starts smashing everything in sight. He then sees something, and wonders if it's the giant metal hatch in the floor. Barky says definitely not. Ju-hyuk goes down, and says he can't see anything, so this'll be a bit annoying. The status window updates, saying the conditions have been met. Then Ju-hyuk eyes adjust, and he sees a woman sitting down. So he asks her where they are, and who she is. The woman says it's nice to meet him, and she'll answer the questions. He sits down, and she says that she is a guide. Then she says it's not her real name, which wasn't obvious apparently. She says her name was taken away, and Ju-hyuk recalls what the shadow figure said to him. Then double checks that her name was yoinked. He asks her what that truly means, asking how you can steal a name. She says that names hold power, and all creatures build their lives upon their names, and blah blah, everything they do in life contributes to their names. So a name that's gotten many achievements means they have great power. And that shadowy figure steals names so they can absorb the power they contain. Ju-hyuk asks what happens to the person who had their name stolen. She says that he's familiar with it. And that they become constellations. Which surprises him. He confirms it again that those who have their names taken, turn into constellations. The lady says he's probably an exception due to being reincarnated. He had a feeling she knew about it just like Barky did. She asks if he's curious if she's the one who reincarnated him, and gave him the status window. She then tells him that isn't the case, as she only knows this all through the status windows. Ju-hyuk tells her to stop skirting the topic, then he bluntly asks her who the figure was in the Tower of Destruction. She says that his name is Maze Lord, and as she said earlier, his goal is to collect people's names and steal their power. Ju-hyuk says that it's strange, asking how the Maze Lord was able to send the Tower of Destruction to Earth. Since it's something that can only be done in the mazes that he manages, then Ju-hyuk realizes it. The woman tells him that the entire world is actually a maze. He asks her if he's meant to believe it, and she tells him it's up to him. She has no reason to lie. He says alright then, and then confirms that the Maze Lord is trying to just steal names. She says yes, and tells him that the names that carry weight and have achievements, have all accumulated a lot of karma. So stealing just any name isn't good enough, you need a name that has a lot of karma to become a constellation. Ju-hyuk pieces together that his disciples might have been constellations. Name drop, as they all made names for themselves. Ju-hyuk says they are all just playing into the Maze Lord's hands it seems. She then says no, and since he was reincarnated he has become a variable. And he might be the one to defeat the Maze Lord. Ju-hyuk tells her that the Maze Lord might also know about him, and he may even be the one who allowed them to see the status windows. She says nah, and the person behind all of that isn't the Maze Lord. Ju-hyuk then asks who it is, to which she has no clue. She says they might be someone connected to him, but they can't let this opportunity go to waste. She crafts him a ring, and gives it to him. He asks her about it, but she says she cannot tell him since there's no time. But it will be a key to their counterattack. He asks her why she can't just tell him now. She tells him that she's currently being chased by the Maze Lord. But since Ju-hyuk's met the condition it'll be easier for them to meet from now on. She tells him she'll see him in a couple of days, and not to lose his ring. Then she snaps her fingers, and he says that was quite a flashy way to send him to the entrance. But he knows how the person who sent him to the tower took his name. And prevented him from living a comfortable life, which makes him angry. He looks down at the ring, saying he doesn't know what it is, but decides that it's time to absorb the remaining magic power left in the storage stones that he wasn't able to do before. Afterwards, even if his strength won't be back, his magic power should be back to when he was at his prime. It cuts to an island in the North Pacific. A man is looking at the news of Samsel getting bodied, and it makes him angry to the point he breaks his tablet. We learn that he's the Samsel leader, named Hannibal. He says that he carefully observed Ju-hyuk, and how he defeated Jinjin, Arin's brother who signed a provisional contract. So even when the Ventrix son asked, and paid like as he made sure to bring 3 people for it. But now he feels like he got robbed, and he wonders if he should just call for all of the Samsel members. And thinks about how cringe it is, that they need the entire group. Another voice says that Hannibal looks troubled. It's a man named Georg who is the leader of the first species. Hannibal tells him that he warned him to knock before coming in. Georg says he only came in since he seemed troubled. Then asked if it's because of Ju-hyuk, he says yes. Georg says he also had trouble since he took one of his pawns. Hannibal asks if he means Dizra, and Georg says yes. Dizra didn't report it to the group since it was a personal job. But he still got clapped and gave his identity away to Ju-hyuk. He wanted Dizra to be an informant in the Ventrix family, but he had to kill him before he could leak any more info. Hannibal asks him if he can kill the 3 Samsel members who were captured as well. Georg says if he's commissioning it then yes. Then Hannibal goes to ask about Ju-hyuk too, but Georg says not to mess with him anymore. Georg explains to him that Ju-hyuk is the target of the first cult. Hannibal calls them a crazy group, and Georg agrees, saying they are lunatics since nobody knows what they are trying to achieve, and he says they killed some of Logan's squad. The kid from the other school's dad. Hannibal says he heard about that too, and he's glad they are targeting Ju-hyuk. And is glad for the warning since they might become targets too. And now they just need to wait. It cuts to Ju-hyuk being surrounded by what's probably the first cult. Ju-hyuk asks them who they are, saying that they are standing in the Valhalla campus. Then asks if they are fearless, or just dumb. Flashback starts, and one of them we see is the dude from the Ventrix, who is informing Adalia that the preparation is complete. She says that she understands that it took a while. He apologizes to her saying that since it's Valhalla, they needed quite the prep for it. Adalia confirms that they are using contractors with the ability to create subspace. The man tells her that all of those chosen to carry the task out are chosen by the family. There will be no chance the story will leak. Adalia says good, then asks if he's also prepared the other thing. He says yes, and we learn it's something for sanctuarization. They've gotten a huge storage stone full of magic power. She says good, and it's time for her to make a move now too. She also tells him to stay in the contact group, and lead the disposal group after the subspace is completed. He says he will, then asks her if they are using sanctuarization to make a constellation appear. She says yes, and he asks her why she's calling one. She starts to act snarky, and asks if he thinks she's going overboard, or if she's afraid of a student. He says no, and she says it's just a safety measure, so don't worry. And that the constellation, who never really said much, suddenly took an interest in it, which bothers her. So if she can call him, it means she can ask about why he's interested. The flashback ends, then he tells them to prepare for the subspace. They begin to put their hands on the floor, creating a barrier around Ju-hyuk. He realizes it's a subspace and he says it makes sense due to them being in Valhalla. Then he asks who came up with the idea, and hits the nail on the head asking if it's Adalia. The man asks him how he knew. Ju-hyuk asks how he couldn't since among his enemies, 2 of them used black magic, while the other one doesn't, so obviously it's the Ventric family. The man says since they've been caught, no point in hiding. So call the disposal team. They all begin to unleash their magic power while getting ready to jump him. Ju-hyuk smirks, asking if they are ashamed to bring this many people to deal with a student. The man raises his blade, saying it doesn't matter since they are just following orders. Ju-hyuk begins to warm up his shoulder saying the patriarch must be quite shameless. This angers Buddy, who shouts for his men to get rid of him. They jump Ju-hyuk, who pushes his shoulder into one of them, then sends them all flying backward. As they fall onto the floor, the butler swings at Ju-hyuk, who backpedals the attack. He asks why he's swinging a saber while summoning his sword. To attack him from above, they hit the floor. He goes for a counter-attack, kicking them both. He says they sure are relentless. The butler prepares an attack, then thrusts at the back of Ju-hyuk's head, who simply leads sideways to avoid it. Who realizes he's screwed up, goes for a follow-up and of course gets dodged. Ju-hyuk calls him annoying, and the butler looks down to see Ju-hyuk's hilt on his chest. Then back up to him hammering it with his hand, creating a powerful shockwave to pass through the butler. As he's going unconscious he says he made a mistake thinking he went overboard with the prep, but realizing it wasn't enough, and he passes out. Ju-hyuk says it's about time she crawled out, as we see Adalia finally made her appearance. She looks around to see that most of the disposal team have already been defeated. And for them to lose this badly, this needs to be taken care of. She tells Ju-hyuk to be proud, since he got to see the Ventric family relic. He asks why he needs to be proud to see some mid-dagger, and calls her shameless. She stabs at him while calling him trash, and the magic stone the butler brought starts to move around. Not just his, but every member there notices their magic stones are glowing, and even Adalia is confused on what's going on. Then her dagger begins to glow too, and she realizes what's going on as a sun-like aura begins to form. Time has frozen entirely for anyone that isn't Ju-hyuk, and he wonders what's going on. Adalia is still conscious unlike anyone else, but she cannot move. She wonders why Ju-hyuk is fine. Then he grabs the dagger, and sees a golden status window say Master. Ju-hyuk questions it, then a figure begins to appear from the relic. We see it's the beak mask that the Ventric family serves. They take off the mask, to reveal that it's actually a woman. She calls out to Ju-hyuk, and he stares at her, while recalling how he met her. She was chained up while he was still Yun-oh, and he said her eyes were full of hatred for humans. She tells him not to pretend like she knows her, asking what he could possibly know about her. He says he knows enough about it, since he too was once a slave. He had no power and was kidnapped when he was younger, and he lived like her because of the shackles placed on him. He asks if she wants to be free. She says for a slave that is a dumbass question, it's something he should know that she's dreamed of. So stop provoking her and to get lost, since she doesn't know when the slave trader will be back. He tells her that the characteristic of the binding can only be lifted when the one who owns it either releases it, or dies. And if she's unlucky it may not be released if the owner dies. And in her case, it seems like what happened. She asks if he's dead, then screams that now she has no way out. He tells her there still is, and grabs the collar like he did for Yuri, and says he can interpret the magic component of the runes, and break it. While it isn't his specialty, it sure won't be an issue. Because it's how he ended his life as a slave, his mana begins to attack the runes and her collar breaks into pieces. She's surprised that it is broken, and tears begin to form in her eyes. He says since she's free now, it's all up to her. And asks her what she'll do with her freedom now, saying she can go to her family if she wants. She hesitates, then shakily says she doesn't have something like that. Since the traitor killed her family and burned the house down when he kidnapped her. He tells her that he's going to go on a journey to eliminate slave traders. Just like he did to the Baldy today. Then asks if she'd like to accompany him. She thinks about it, then says she'll follow him. He tells her good and to treat him like her master. She says sure, and he says to speak with honorifics, instead of like a moron. She says she understands, and tells her it's time to go. Then she asks what his name is, and how she can address him. He tells her his name, then she smiles and she says her name, but he doesn't remember it. Back to reality, she's still smiling at him and he says it looks like she became a constellation. And he can say he knows her better than everyone else, but he cannot remember her name, and he wonders if this is what the Maze Lord meant by taking his name too. He says it doesn't matter since he knows her nickname, and calls her moron, saying it's been a while. Adalia is surprised he called her that, since she's a constellation. And she says before they can have their reunion, then walks to Adalia. And grabs onto her dagger, which makes Adalia curious. Then she takes it from Adalia's hands, and they all unfreeze then drop to the floor. She asks Ju-hyuk what she should do now, asking if she should kill them. He says no, and he has a better idea. The next day, we see the homeroom teacher absolutely shook, as he sees the Ventric family has sponsored Ju-hyuk. We learn it's a fatty sponsorship too. Sang-il walks up to him saying it looks like he saw it too. And how it's odd that they donated at a time like this. The homeroom teach asks if it's because of Rockdill, and says he was the one who hired Samsel too. Sang-il says it doesn't make sense that they'd cover it up with money. Since when Ju-hyuk was attacked by Dizra they did that before, but now they've already excommunicated Rockdill. So if they didn't draw the line then they'd have tried to free him from the detention center. But they did none of that, so what is the real reason for the sponsorship? The homeroom teach says he doesn't even know if Ju-hyuk will accept it. Sang-il says they'll find out when they ask him. And it cuts to the interview room, with him saying he'll accept it. Which surprised Teach. Ju-hyuk asks why he'd turn the money down. And asks if he can leave now since he accepted it. Teach tells him to wait, saying not only did he get sponsored, but the academy received donations as well. And based on Valhalla's rules he can move to the better dormitory. Ju-hyuk says he's fine with him currently, but he'll change later. Teach says alright, and Ju-hyuk leaves. Teach wonders what's been going on since he turned it down last time, but now he's accepting it. But since the academy took a W, it doesn't matter. As Ju-hyuk is walking down the hall, he gives us the flashback we need of Moron asking what to do with them all. And how he said he had a better idea. We see Adalia shaking on her knees. And he tells her that the constellation will overlook what he does to them, then asks what she thinks he should do. Moron says that she made the Ventric family to serve him, so he can do whatever he wants. Adalia then asks Moron if the phrase all for one, they always say. Then gets interrupted by Moron saying it was all for master, and calls her stupid. Adalia then asks if Ju-hyuk is really her master, and she says yes. Ju-hyuk says it's enough questions about him, saying Adalia should be worried about herself. He thinks about how even if he killed them all it wouldn't be enough. But that their prestige and power is the real deal, so he needs to take advantage of this to live a comfy life. But it'd be a pain in the ass to control them. Then he asks Adalia if she's been doing a good job managing the family. She says it's been 4 since she took over as head of the family, and they've managed to reclaim their power and become the strongest family in Britain in that time. He says if that's so, then to keep managing it. She asks what he means. He tells her to support his activities at a family level, and not to ask him why. Since if she messes up, she'll know what awaits her. Moron says not to worry, and she'll make sure nothing happens again. As she goes to disappear, she says that she thinks it's time. She explains how the space where constellations can manifest directly requires a lot of magic power, so he'll need dozens of stones full of power. He says it makes sense why they had so many now, and she says since the mana has vanished, and she used some of her power, she'll need to rest a little. He asks if the constellations have always been facing such restrictions. She takes her mask off, saying it's alright. While blushing, she says being able to see him in person like this is more than enough. He calls her a cheeseball, and says to get some rest. She puts the mask back on, saying she has one last thing to say. She says the other disciple has also become a constellation. He should meet him soon. Then she turns into light and vanishes. Ju-hyuk wonders which disciple she meant, then says maybe all of them have become constellations. He says he's met 2 constellations so far, Barky and Moron. The one with Barky was inevitable due to the status window, but the one with Moron was just a coincidence, right? Also, there are a ton of constellations, so it makes no sense to see all of them. He also realizes that Barky hasn't said a word since meeting the guide, but Barky says he's there. And Ju-hyuk asks why he's lurking. Barky says he was organizing his thoughts, since his memories were cut off the moment he entered the secret room. Barky says in the mental world it felt like Ju-hyuk came out as soon as he went into the room, but some of his memories came back. Ju-hyuk asks if he remembered how weak he was. Barky says those were trivial memories and he learned the concept of names, which he should know too by now. And how the Maze Lord was the one who gave him the name of Barky originally. Ju-hyuk enters the classroom and sits down like nothing happened, and double checks what Barky just said. Barky says that's right, and he gave him both power and a name at the same time, granting him the Tower of Destruction. Ju-hyuk asks if the power influences one's personality. Barky says yes. When he was the Tower Lord in the past it made him more rigid. But his current state is closer to his original personality. Ju-hyuk asks how the Maze Lord can just take and give names. Barky says no clue. Ju-hyuk then says since the world is his labyrinth he can just do as he pleases. Barky is surprised, asking him what he means, and Ju-hyuk asks if he needs a map since he's so lost. It cuts to a bit later after he explains it to him, and he says the guide mentioned that there is a chance to counterattack, so they need to wait. It cuts again to the next day. He's meeting with the guide again. He asks her what she needs. We see he has a food tray with him, and she asks him what it is. He tells her what it is, saying she called him during lunch. She apologizes, so he sits down saying it's alright. She quickly gets to the point, asking if has the ring. He pulls it out, and she says they are going to use it. Ju-hyuk asks how it's meant to be used for a counterattack. She says he simply needs to wear the ring and break through the labyrinth. He asks if it can be any labyrinth, saying how there are no more naturally occurring ones, and all of the ones now are managed. She says it needs to be a specific one, and soon the Maze Lord will generate them. Then she says he'd know them better as dungeon breaks, or disasters. Which is when monsters pour out of the labyrinths after they appear. Before he reincarnated they were all over, but now things are quiet and enjoyable. Ju-hyuk asks the guide when it'll happen, and how big it will be. She says in 3 months, and it'll be in Korea. He gets sarcastic since she doesn't know where in Korea it'll be. She says that what she can do is limited due to the Maze Lord. Ju-hyuk says that if the world is a labyrinth, what exactly are the labyrinths that spawn here? She says that he intentionally created them. Ju-hyuk asks if it's so he can give and take names. Guide lady says for sure. And before the Tower of Destruction, he's been preparing to force people to adapt. Ju-hyuk confirms he just needs to wear the ring and break the labyrinth. She says yes, then asks how he used to destroy labyrinths. He tells her that he used to just ignore the bosses since they were annoying. So he just destroyed the labyrinth stones to make them vanish. She tells him not to do that this time, and to properly defeat the boss. He asks why. She explains how labyrinths are created through the power of names, and the power of said names generally come from the boss. While wearing the ring, once the boss is defeated he will be able to absorb the power of the name. After that, they will be able to counterattack. Ju-hyuk then says that the Maze Lord probably has more than one of 2 names collected, So how can they counterattack after stealing a single name? She says it's a good point, and that the Maze Lord won't even care about losing a single name. As his goal is adaptation, and the core of the plan isn't the stealing of names, but quickly clearing the labyrinth. As once the Lord realizes it was destroyed so quickly, he'll resort to other measures. Such as sending many names into the world, and then the ability to absorb names on a larger scale will appear. He then says he has another question, and asks what sets them apart from the Maze Lord if they just steal names. She says that's surprising since she didn't think he'd care about things like that. He tells her he needs a legitimate answer. She says that for starters, they aren't taking innocent people's names, and if he takes the Lord's name away he will be trapped without existence. No clue what this means, she continues by saying that they can free those who had their names taken. But it's all up to him with what he wants to do, and he'll know who the owners are of the names after absorbing them. Ju-hyuk says bet, then says they just need to wait for a dungeon break. She says that she'll tell him the location and date in the future. She also tells him to make a team and stop the disaster, since even if the boss dies the monsters outside will remain alive. So they should prevent that. She snaps her fingers again. Ju-hyuk zones back into the lunchroom and just looks goofy. After he leaves he's pissed that she didn't warn him before she moved him. He says that making a team would be pretty goated, since it was convenient back when he had his disciples. Then he wonders if he should just raise more disciples, but gets jump scared by Lang just standing there, menacingly. He asks her what she wants, and why she's here. She says she thought about it after losing, she wondered why she lost, then she figured it out. That he's just stronger than her. He asks her if she has anything going on upstairs, and she says she thought she was similar to him. She thought she had overwhelming talent since she never experienced defeat. He tells her that she's misunderstanding. He considered himself someone who puts in effort. She says that what she said before is what she used to think, but not anymore. The moves he hit her with weren't just simple attacks, it was movements that came from countless repetition. She was furious upon losing, but she knows it was due to a lack of experience. Which made her understand that she's stronger after fighting against him too. She would like to continue fighting him, to eventually win. Then she challenges him to a duel, and he tells her not to bother him with her weird logic, and he's leaving now. She pleads that she came all the way from China to fight him, to which he says it's not his business, and suggests that she masters the family martial arts instead of wasting her time like this. She says that she doesn't know, and that she only received training until she was 6, and was self-taught till now. Then they talk about some stuff that I have no clue about, like her taking control of contractors. And how from the start they weren't her fans, and she took action first. She kept being excluded from the family training, so she asked them to be her partners. So she was fighting adult contractors, so she just continued to win. She's happy there wasn't a lot of them. Ju-hyuk says what Yun said overlaps, but the expressions are different. Lang is clearly talented and enjoys fights, but Yun acted like she just went around fighting everyone. Ju-hyuk asks if she can be confined to the White Lotus Palace. She says that she was trapped there because she was tired of being treated like the family's headache. But it's fine, since she found Ju-hyuk. He asks her why that matters. She says that if she can fight someone stronger than her, then she won't need her family's teachings. He asks her who's fighting, then she starts to beg him to fight her. Ju-hyuk thinks that it's weird, she was an outcast of the family, so why did Yun want her back? And he's unsure on her family's dynamics, but wouldn't it have been better for her to stay locked up? He tells her okay, and to stop touching him. She asks if they'll fight now, and he tells her not here and they'll go to the gym instead. She's happy. At the gym we see Arin and Soyeon, and Seok all staring at Lang. Ju-hyuk tells her to wait and he'll be back later. Arin walks up to him, then asks who she is. He tells her she's crazy and she's here to fight him. Arin looks over at her, and Ju-hyuk says it'll just be a one-time thing. Arin turns angry and gives her the death stare. Lang asks her if she wants to fight too. Arin says not yet. Soyeon recognizes that Lang must be part of the White Lotus family, and says that's great. It cuts to the sparring area. Ju-hyuk says he agreed to fight with her, but asks why the rest are there. Seok gives the Chad response of don't mind him. Lang starts warming up, telling him to get ready since she's stronger than last time. He says if that's the case he should be able to use his full power, and he recalls the guide's word about making a team. Ju-hyuk asks Lang if she wants to be strong, she says yes. And he tells her if he wins she will become his disciple. She tells him she's just trying to be stronger than him. He tells her that she can achieve it after becoming a student. And they both prepare for the fight, Lang says she dislikes teachers. Then she lunges at him with an elbow attack. He blocks it with his palm, and says she's strong. She begins to release some aura, saying he might have blocked that attack, but he can't stop this one, while releasing even more power. Soyeon and them are surprised that such a monster exists. Seok says she has more aura concentration than Juhyuk did in the competition. Lang breaks the arena by dashing off of it. Lang's got the Gojo mental of I'd win, saying even if he blocks it the impact will be enough to cause damage. But she sees him making the same pose, and he tells her he likes fighting things head on. As she gets closer to him their fists stretch out and connect with each other, and her mana gets dispersed backwards. She's worried that she's being pushed back, saying he didn't have this much power back then. And that he's infinitely stronger than before. She wonders if it's really the same dude she fought before. Juhyuk then says he'll only take it head on once, and now he'll block and strike as he pleases. He kicks her directly in the stomach, and she says she couldn't get another meaningful hit this time, then falls to the floor. Juhyuk says he's gained another disciple. We see her sleeping on the floor, then she opens her eyes and jolts up. He hits her with the Skyrim dialogue, and she realizes she lost again. He tells her she's quite strong, and he thought she'd be knocked out until tomorrow morning. But she woke up quickly. She asks if he's making fun of her. He tells her it's time to become his disciple. She says she was going to suggest using just their bodies for the next fight, but doubt it'll matter. And says that she'll listen to him. She asks if she's his first disciple. He says nah. She then asks him if he's been cultivating them since middle school or something, and he says no. Arin steps up saying that he's right, and she's his first disciple, and calls her Kitty. Juhyuk awkwardly sweats since she isn't the first disciple either. Lang, who looks like a tiger, dislikes what Arin said, so she asks if she's picking a fight. Arin says yes, then says Kitty again. They start squaring up with each other, and Arin says that Kitty is a cute nickname, and Lang blushes asking if she wants to die. Juhyuk watches this while thinking, then says that this view is actually quite nostalgic. Even before he reincarnated, seeing his disciples always gave him a similar feeling. Juhyuk tells Kitty to stop now, and she tells him not to call her that. He says it's true Arin received training first, so she's her senior, and not to be rude to her senior. Arin says she should also be respectful to her junior. Arin looks happy that he acknowledges her as his first disciple. And says that she'll endure it. Kitty angry. Juhyuk says enough banter, and they'll call it a day and go home. Lang asks where she should sleep. Juhyuk asks if she didn't find somewhere to sleep before this. She says she came here instantly to fight. Since she asked Yun what to do to fight him again, she only told her to come to Korea. Juhyuk is surprised she came here without any plan in mind, and says that the school gave him a dorm. She can stay there for now. Arin goes back to bantering with her, and it cuts to Juhyuk walking at night. He says that he is tired, and got too worked up to finish his routine properly. Juhyuk thinks about how they'll definitely play the part of disciples, and how Soyeon and Seok don't seem interested in joining. So it'll probably just be Lang and Arin helping him with the disaster. Then he looks at his phone to see that Adalia is calling him. He answers it, and she says that she's finalizing the donations and other matters, so she wanted to report back to him. He tells her he saw the funds this morning. She says is that so, then asks if he has any other questions. He then tells her to issue a notice to contractors. That there will be a disaster 3 months from now. She's shocked. Asking how he knows about it, he tells her not to ask about it, but he knows it'll be here. She asks if he means Korea. He says yes. Then she says alright, she'll contact the useful ones from Korea. He tells her to keep it a secret, but before he hangs up she says she has something to say, then asks if he'll speak highly of her to Moron when she wakes up. He waits a second, then asks if she's still asleep, or just ignoring her. Adalia says she's asleep, and Juhyuk recalls her saying she'll need to take a short break and it seems like a day wasn't enough. He says he'll tell her, and Adalia thanks him. The next day after school, in the gym. We see Juhyuk sweating while running. Arin is sweating too. Lang is absolutely dying out here. After Juhyuk finishes he looks over to see her gassed out on the floor. And she says she needs to breathe and it feels like she's going to die, then panics saying she almost died. He says she's clearly alive, and compliments how well she's doing currently, saying he expected her to fall behind. She says that she's not playing around here. Juhyuk says they should slow down a bit, then we hear a woman asking him if Lang is here. Juhyuk stares at the woman, and says her appearance resembles Yun and Lang's. Then the woman looks down to see Lang on the floor, and asks why she didn't tell her mother before coming here. Ju-hyuk asks her if she is Lang's mother, and the woman introduces herself as Yeonhwa. I guess everyone in the family has similar names, maybe. She's the head of the Seoul family, and also Lang's mother. Yun, who we all know as her little sister. Yeonhwa says it's strange and that Yun said she'd contact her when Lang finally left the palace, but she never did that, but Lang came here instead. Lang looks worried, and Yeonhwa says she'll figure it out later, and it's time for Lang to follow her back to the palace. Lang starts shaking, saying that she didn't care before about how she was treated, but now she wants her back, and says she needs to get lost. Only trying to treat her like a daughter now is irritating. Yeonhwa says she only acted that way previously due to the constellation, and she knew that. Lang says she heard it from the maid, rather than her own mother. Yeonhwa says it doesn't matter since she found out, and the constellation instructed her to summon her. It's her chance to be recognized by the constellation, and not to embarrass her mother anymore. Lang looks worried, that she wants her to come back now, and asks if this is why she wanted her out of the room. Her mother says yes, and Lang begins to shake out of anger, and tells her to get out. And that they shouldn't disturb the students here, where they are as Valhalla, not White Lotus, or the Seoul family. So don't cause a disturbance. Yeonhwa asks if she knows why there's no guards with her, and that's so she can take her away without being noticed. Then she begins to imbue her hand with mana, and hits Lang. This sends her backward a bit, and she asks her what she's doing. Yeonhwa says she's already told her, and that she will not be cautious. Lang says she also won't be holding back, then runs directly at her, saying she surely remembers the last time she challenged her that she lost. Lang jumps for a Superman punch, but it quickly gets caught by Yeonhwa, who says she's gotten stronger and must have been training hard. Lang says, obviously, since she didn't want to fall behind. Yeonhwa says she should go back now, and learn properly at the family, then begins to flip Lang over to her side. Lang is surprised that her skills are this good, but lands on her feet since she's a cat. Then kicks Yeonhwa, saying to let go. Yeonhwa says that was quite barbaric, and gets told to stop yapping. Arin and Ju-hyuk watch this, and Arin asks if they should stop it or something. Since the head of the Seoul family is causing a commotion here, like calling the instructors. Ju-hyuk tells her that'll just make it even worse, and that he doesn't like Yeonhwa. Arin agrees, saying she abandoned her daughter, but suddenly needs her back now. And how Kitty must have been frustrated by all of this. Lang punches at Yeonhwa, but she dodges it, telling her to follow her before she gets hurt. Lang raises her leg, saying that she's going to be the one getting hurt, and gets kicked again. As Yeonhwa slides across the ground, Lang says she's for sure reeling from that one since it had a lot of power behind it. Then Lang realizes that her foot is frozen solid. Yeonhwa says this'll be her first time seeing this, and it's the power of their family's constellation. The King of the North. He's like Set or something. Yeonhwa says that she'll have the opportunity to use the ability through a contract with the constellation. Lang says she thought her mother got stronger, but now she knows it's just her recklessly borrowing power from a constellation. Yeonhwa asks what's reckless about it, and it's natural in the world that is the family that houses a constellation. You use their power. So surely she's not delusional to the point she thinks that Yeonhwa fought her, purely with her physical abilities previously. Then she says she'll ask her again for the final time. Then asks if she will come back or not. Lang looks at her hand, then tells her she won't be going back. Yeonhwa calls her an immature brat, and that she shouldn't even think about returning safely. Lang begins to panic since she couldn't react in time due to her frozen foot. Yeonhwa says she'll freeze and shatter her arm, then she can reflect about it after losing an arm. As she gets close, Ju-hyuk kicks her arm away. We see Lang with her eyes closed out of fear, but opens them to see Ju-hyuk. And he's asking her mother if she's really about to cut her daughter's arm off. Yeonhwa says it's none of his business, as it's just education. Ju-hyuk explains how he's been in a similar situation before. Yeonhwa is wondering how Ju-hyuk didn't get frozen by the attack, and realizes her hand is shaking from the kick. So she understands that she was hit by a magic stronger than hers. He then tells Arin to take Lang out of here. Lang tries to tell him that she can fight, since it's her family's business. He says she cannot even feel her leg, and why would a master watch as his disciple is being hurt, so stay back. She begins to blush, and says alright. Yeonhwa asks how one student can teach another. She just wanted to take her daughter, but it influenced him, and now he's acting like her master. He says that she's misunderstanding it, and she says that it's definitely an unusual situation so she'll test his skills herself. He says despite her cold appearance, she's just as aggressive as Lang. While he kicked her earlier, dealing with her without using a lot of mana will be difficult. He decides to just dodge her attacks and look for an opening. But Yeonhwa notices this, then slices at his head. He dodges it. And the attack freezes a lot of the equipment behind Ju-hyuk. He thinks it's interesting that it did so much without even landing, and he tells her to make sure and reimburse the school after she leaves. She says she'll think about it if he actually wins. Then strikes at him again. Ju-hyuk says dodging will just be pointless, but it's not like he can just eat the attack either. So he raises his leg, then kicks her hand away from him, causing her attack to go straight into the ceiling. She gets distracted by it, then gets jump scared by Ju-hyuk punching her. She coughs up blood after getting smacked in the chest, which causes her to fall to the floor, and she gets her POV. Lang is shocked that she was overpowered so easily, even when her mom has a Constellations power. Yeonhwa compliments Ju-hyuk, saying now she understands why he's acting like her master now. But regardless of that, she will be taking Lang with her, since it's what her constellation wants. Even if she fails, there will be plenty of others who will replace her. Lang asks if her opinion really doesn't matter. Yeonhwa says the Constellations order is first, as it's their family's purpose. Lang shakes since she doesn't want to fight someone from her family, then yells for her to stop it. Ju-hyuk starts to get really angry, then asks how to meet with the constellation. She asks why, and he says that if the constellation will keep sending people then he just needs to beat the constellation up. Yeonhwa asks if he's even aware of what he's talking about, and that constellations require a lot of magic power to summon. And just for the sake of him, who may harm the family, they wouldn't activate the sanctification. Ju-hyuk says there's another way besides sanctification, and directly touching the sacred relic and transitioning in the realm of mind. Yeonhwa says he's quite knowledgeable about contracts and relics even while being so young. She says he's right, though, and he'll be transported to the constellation, the King of the North, but unlike the world they are in now. The mental world is purely the domain of constellations, and when normal people enter, they'll be crushed by the pressure. Yet, he's still trying to stand up to a constellation. He says yeah, and she says it's not possible right now. As an outsider, touching the family relic isn't something she can decide for herself, and they'll ask the constellation himself. Until he decides there will be no attacks on Lang or Ju-hyuk. He says alright, then she asks what his plan is if he gets defeated in the mind realm. Since giving him the opportunity without any conditions seems like an L on their part no matter how you look at it. Lang gets angry, but Ju-hyuk thinks and says if he loses or not, he'll be on his own terms. If he wins, she'll leave Lang alone forever, and he'll take care of her. Yeonhwa thinks he is arrogant, but says she'll leave for now. Then she does exactly that, and exits the building. Ju-hyuk is still pissed, and it cuts to a week later, with him meeting the King of the North. They keep having their WWE stare down, and then we get flashback to a few days ago at the Valhalla dorms. Ju-hyuk opens the door for Lang, then cuts the lights on, saying she can live here for a while. She's surprised that the dorm is at such a high level, saying it's like a well-off family's house. She asks if she can really use this alone, and he says yes, he was meant to move in, but he decided to use the one he already has instead. She says she understands. She looks down and blushes a bit, then asks Ju-hyuk why he's taking care of her so much. Whether Yeonhwa or the rest come to attack her, it's family business so he could just ignore it. She asks if it's really only because he's her disciple. He says there's that, and he dislikes how they treat her, and just the attitude his mother has in general. He asks if it made her uncomfortable. She quickly says no, and that isn't it. She'd never received attention like this, so she wanted to thank him. He smiles, and says if she finds the training difficult then want her grateful feelings disappear. Then he says he has a question, and asks about the King of the North. He asks her what kind of guy he is, and she says that she doesn't know too much since she isn't close to her family. But she's heard he doesn't interfere with the family often, and quite a bit of the family doesn't know who he is. Ju-hyuk says it's weird that he wanted Lang to be brought to him. She doesn't know either since she has no ties to the constellation. She's never even received his protection that everyone else receives. He says if that's the case, then he'll just listen to the story from the source. Then tells her to rest properly, as she'll be his guide when her family comes. As he leaves she watches him then starts to blush, while feeling something in her chest. Back at Ju-hyuk's dorm, we see him on the phone. It's Adalia that he's called, and he asks her for a favor. He tells her he fought with the Soul family. She asks how it happened, and he quickly explains how she came for her daughter. Adalia asks if Lang is currently in Valhalla. He changes the topic, saying that a lot of equipment was damaged and asks if she can handle it from her side. She says yes, and then asks if he needs anything else. So he asks her about the King of the North. She says he doesn't get involved in family matters personally, so she's pretty unsure about him. Then he asks her if Moron woke up. She says there's still no response. Adalia then asks him if he's maybe asking about Moron so he can tell her how hard-working she's been. Joo-hyuk says she seems comfortable enough to spew nonsense. He's going to hang up now. She says she's sorry, and then hangs up. Barky says that's quite unlike him. He asks what he means, and Barky says that his style's always been just fight first, and ask questions later. He says that's true, but he's weaker than he was before, so he doesn't want to confront someone without knowing their strength. Also, the Mind Realm apparently lets Constellations release their full power. Then Joo-hyuk wonders why Barky is weak in the Mind Realm, since he'd be as strong as anyone else with his original power. Barky then says he can give some tips about fighting in the Mind Realm, and it has nothing to do with physical strength. Joo-hyuk asks him what it is. Then Barky hits him with some Riddler-type line, and Joo-hyuk asks if he's trying to make a joke. He continues with some stuff that goes way over my head, but Joo-hyuk understands it, saying that now he just needs to fight the Constellation. Then it jumps a week ahead at the Seoul family house, and Yeonhwa and the family members are greeting him. She says that she thought he'd run away. He says he's not irresponsible. Then, he asks if he can touch the relic now. She scrunches her face, telling him to follow her. He tells Lang he'll be back, and she watches him walk off. She opens a door, to reveal a snowy tundra landscape. Joo-hyuk wonders what happened to the room they were just in. Then Yeonhwa pulls a box out of the ground. She says she thought about what to do if Joo-hyuk loses, and that she'll turn him into a household slave. He says yeah, whatever, and asks for the relic. She holds it up to him, and he grabs onto it. And flashback ends. We're back in front of the King of the North. Joo-hyuk says that this guy is not his disciple, but he's familiar, and wonders who he is. The Constellation says so it's him, a figure who is a threat to the Seoul clan. Joo-hyuk hits him with the "Who are you again?" and asks for introductions. The king prepares his fist, saying if he survives it they can talk. Joo-hyuk smiles, then hella giant icicles fly directly at him. We see them crash into the floor. The king watches on as he sees Joo-hyuk is completely unfazed by the attack. He says that's impressive and says he used magic power to jump further. He says he guesses it isn't a big deal, and he tried to introduce himself with his real name, but after being here so long, he doesn't remember. So he just introduces himself as the King of the North. Joo-hyuk wonders why there's a sudden snowstorm. King says that the one they admired is Nanchan, and the one who was afraid of him was called Seoul. So he just combined the two titles, and is the god of Seoul. Joo-hyuk introduces himself, and Nanchan says okay, and that he'll remember the name. While raising his hand, which creates ice pillars to form beside Joo-hyuk, who realizes it's to block off a retreat, Nanchan prepares another attack then punches at Joo-hyuk. As the ice flies at him, he says it's going to be troublesome to deal with. Then pulls out his sword. Nanchan says it looks familiar. Then Joo-hyuk stabs into the ice, breaking it and sending it back toward Nanchan. As they fly at him, he says that using his own ice is ridiculous since the ice and snow here are under his control. Joo-hyuk dashes directly at him, and swings at Nanchan, but he blocks it with his palm. He asks if the previous attack was to obstruct his vision, saying it's a good idea, but it lacked power. Joo-hyuk asks if that's really the case, and Nanchan's arm begins to shake. Joo-hyuk says he wonders if this one will also be lacking power, then punches him in the stomach. Joo-hyuk releases some mana, sending Nanchan flying away from him, straight into his throne. Joo-hyuk asks if it's satisfying having a real fight. Nanchan grunts, then says that the magical attack, along with the sword, he understands now. Then asks if he is the martial god. Joo-hyuk says it's a nickname his disciples gave him, but yes. Nanchan begins to sweat, and says he doesn't know him well, but saw his power 300 years ago. We get a flashback to when Nanchan was being jumped by a lot of monsters, and he managed to deal with them in his own way. But it wasn't enough, and he couldn't handle so many alone. He was determined to just bring as many down as he could before dying, but then the martial god arrived. He was full of questions, but as soon as he rose his sword into the air and cut down the entire army with one strike, his curiosity was replaced with wonder. The magic power he felt then is the same, even if the appearance itself has changed. He is clearly him. Joo-hyuk says if Nanchan won't attack him, He'll move first. Nanshin says he wanted to fight him properly, at least one time just to see how far he is. Inside of the waiting area, we see Lang looking a bit worried, and she looks up to see the silhouettes of her family members, who all look at her with scorn. She averts her eyes, saying this is why she didn't want to come back to the family. But she came here anyway, due to Ju-hyuk's request for her to be his guide. She starts to think about it. Some of her family actually enter and were introduced to her sisters, Rin and Pei. Lang asks if they came here for a fight. Pei says that she came here to see her, and Rin says they can't beat her if they fight anyway. Lang says if they just wanted to see her, then they can just stand out with the rest of the family. Rin says there have been some misunderstandings, and she wants to apologize. And that's better to do face to face. Lang asks what she means. Pei tells her that since she ended up in the White Lotus Palace after their fight, they never had a chance to talk. So she wanted to do it now even if it's late. And she's sorry for leaving her out. Lang asks if she came all the here just to say that, and barks at her saying she's only saying this because she's scared of her. Rin tells her that it may seem like it's rushed, but they had no choice. Since every attempt they had at seeing her was stopped by Mother, and not only that, but leaving her out of the training was also her order. This surprised Lang, since she thought they left her out due to jealousy. Pei says that while they are somewhat jealous, they were more proud than jealous, since they have someone as strong as the entire family. And after voicing their opinion to their mother, she then forbade them from letting Lang train with them. She told them that Lang would fight to become the next family head, and how all of the elders would have picked Lang. And after that, regardless of how they felt, they worked with their mother to keep her out of the family. But that she was mistaken, since neither her nor Pei have an interest in being the head. Or rather, it'd be better to say they shouldn't have an interest. Lang asks what they mean, then Yun appears saying she'll explain. Then it cuts back to Nanshin preparing another attack, unleashing it at Ju-hyuk, who evades them all. He pushes off the floor, flying at Nanshin. But he's ready for it, and prepares another attack, and as it flies to Ju-hyuk he smacks it out of the air, saying that it's really annoying, and closes the gap more, asking if he's going to keep it up with the weak attacks. Nanshin says if he wants a strong attack, he'll give him exactly that. Then he creates some weird ice shield thing, and explodes it on Ju-hyuk. But of course he avoids it, and says that actually surprised him. Nanshin says he was planning to freeze him completely, but as expected the martial god avoided it. Ju-hyuk says he's making him embarrassed, and says if Nanshin was this strong in his previous life he'd definitely remember him. Then he realizes that Nanshin must have been training here, and that's how he's gotten stronger than in his past life. He sighs, saying he wishes he could have met Nanshin sooner. Nanshin asks him what he means. Ju-hyuk then praises him for being strong. Nanshin says is that so, and instead of just being satisfied with praises, then begins to imbue his fist with his ice aura, creating a giant fist made of ice energy. He finally finishes his sentence by saying he'll overcome him. Nanshin rears his fist back to attack, and Ju-hyuk prepares his attack too, and they do the anime pass by, dashing through them. Nanshin then says my fault, and drops to his knees saying it wasn't even close. If you've watched till the end, comment, elephant, to let me know. Subscribe for more videos like this, leave a like or a comment to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.